Je déclare ouverte la deuxième séance plénière
The second
de la
plenary
conférence
meeting of the
internationale de haut
high-level
niveau pour les
international
règlements
conference
pacifiques
for
de
the
la question
peaceful settlement of
Palestine
the question
et la
of
mise en œuvre de
Palestine
la
and the
solution des
implementation
deux
of the
États.
two-state solution is called to order.
La conférence va maintenant poursuivre son
The
débat
conference
général.
shall now continue its
Comme
general
annoncé
debate.
dans notre lettre
As
datée du 9
announced
juin,
in our letter dated
conformément aux
9th
modalités
June,
de la
and in
conférence
accordance
énoncées
with
dans
the
la
modalities
résolution
of the conference
79-80
contained in
de
GEA
l'Assemblée
Resolution
générale,
79/81,
et comme indiqué hier,
as well as
les interventions faites dans le cadre
indicated
du débat
yesterday,
général
statements
ne doivent pas
delivered in the general
dépasser
debate should
5
not
minutes.
exceed 5
J'invite celles et
minutes.
ceux dont la déclaration serait plus longue
Speakers with
à en
longer
prononcer une
statements are
version
encouraged
abrégée
to read
et à en
an
transmettre la
abridged
version
version of their
intégrale
text
à
and then to
l'adresse
submit the full length of their statement to
e-statement@un.org pour qu'elle
e-statements
soit
at
publiée sur le
un.org
site du journal
to be
des
posted
Nations
on
Unies.
the Journal of the United
Je donne
Nations.
maintenant la
I now
parole
give the
à son
floor
Excellence M.
to His
Ronald Ozzy
Excellency
Lamola,
Ronald Ozzy
ministre des
Lamola,
Relations internationales
Minister for
et de la
International Relations
coopération
and
de l'Afrique du
Cooperation
Sud.
of South Africa.
Co-chairs, South Africa welcomes this crucial discussion on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution. This conference takes place at a time when we are witnessing the destruction of Gaza, its people, and in real time. In a brazen and wanton act of genocide in full view of the world, South Africa continues to condemn the horrific events of October 7th, where innocent Israeli citizens were killed. Despite this challenging context, in which the international legal and multilateral system has been paralyzed and turned into a blunt tool, the focus today on a real path to lasting peace must prevail. The might is right doctrine can no longer be justified. It has led to perpetual insecurity, and it justifies an attempt to eradicate the Palestinian people through killing and starvation. Co-chairs, South Africa hopes that this conference will plot a real path forward, based on concrete actions for the creation of a Palestinian state existing peaceful and side by side with the state of Israel, along the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Resolution 181, adopted by the General Assembly in 1947, provided for the creation of two states, at a time when South Africa and many other developing countries were under the yoke of colonialism. Many of us have attained our freedom and independence. However, the inalienable right to self-determination of the Palestinian people, guaranteed under international law, has remained elusive for close to 8 years. In the week preceding this conference, a concerning message was sent when the Israel Knesset adopted a motion calling for applying Israel's sovereignty over the occupied West Bank and the Jordan Valley, signaling the intention of Israel to annex this territory. This could effectively bury the two-state solution and continue with the blatant violation of international law, including UN resolutions and the ICJ rulings, which have given hope to the people of Palestine. Their hopes must not be in vain. Peace must prevail. Co-chairs, South Africa is anti-war and prefers dialogue over violence. South Africa would like to stress the following points as fundamental to restoring the credibility of the two-state solution. Firstly, all states must urgently recognize Palestine's statehood, and the territorial integrity and contiguity of Palestine should be established and respected. In this regard, South Africa welcomes the intention of the recognition of the state of Palestine by France as an important step towards achieving a two-state solution. Secondly, there cannot be peace while the very existence of the Palestinian people is being threatened by Israel's continued genocidal actions in Gaza and the forced displacement of Palestinians in the West Bank. This is part of a systematic pattern of injustice and oppression of Palestinians since the adoption of Resolution 181 and the subsequent Nakba in 1948. These actions must be condemned, and the UN Security Council must act to protect the Palestinian people in whole and in part. Thirdly, Preserving the viability of the two-state solution must include promoting safeguards, such as the full respect for international law, including international humanitarian law and human rights law. It is necessary for the immediate and full implementation of resolutions of the United Nations and the provisional measures, as well as advisory opinions of the International Court of Justice, to be respected and to be implemented. Not only Israel, but all states must comply with our collective obligations under international law. We all have a duty to preserve the sanctity of international law and ensure accountability. It is against this backdrop that we have seen the establishment of the Hague Group and the recent meeting of the Madrid Group to elevate the primacy of international law, promote accountability, and ensure a just peace. Finally, all obstacles to two-state solutions should be removed. These include an immediate ceasefire and a commitment to peace process, the release of all hostages by Hamas and political prisoners by the State of Israel, the halting of illegal Israel settlement expansion, the removal of the illegal separation wall cutting across the occupied Palestinian territory, and the resumption of all international reputable human rights relief efforts and the reconstruction of Gaza, which of course can only take place once there is peace. Co-chairs, global attention is on this conference. There is an expectation that we will deliver an effective response to the destruction of an entire population and a peaceful path for preserving the prospect of a viable Palestinian state, existing side by side with the State of Israel in peace and security. This expectation should not be misplaced and could not be higher. 8 years since the founding of the United Nations, this is a matter that has plagued our collective conscience. The solution lies with the tangible recommitment from all of us to the values that must bind us. Peace must reverberate in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, and in the whole of the Palestinian territory. And this is in our hands. I thank you.
Je remercie le ministre des Relations
I thank
internationales et de
the
la
Minister for
coopération de
International
l'Afrique du
Relations
Sud.
and
Je
Cooperation of
donne
South
maintenant
Africa.
la parole
I now give the
à son
floor
Excellence
to
Monsieur
His
Paulo
Excellency
Rangel,
Paulo
ministre des
Rangel,
Affaires étrangères du Portugal.
Minister for Foreign Affairs of Portugal.
Son Excellence, ministre des Affaires étrangères de France,
Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign
Your
Affairs of France.
Highness, Prince Faisal, Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before any other statement or remark, let me be loud and clear. The war must end. The humanitarian crisis and starvation must end. This cycle of violence and destruction must stop. This cycle of violence, initiated with the barbaric attacks of October 7th and the capture of hostages, has led to the killing of thousands of civilians, women and children, and to the brutal destruction of almost all of Gaza's basic infrastructure. We face one of the most horrific sequences of violence between Palestinians and Israelis in their long and difficult history. Portugal understands the suffering of Israeli people. Portugal understands the suffering of Palestinian people. Peace and stability in the Middle East will remain elusive as long as Palestinians are denied their fundamental right to a viable sovereign state and Israel is threatened. For that to happen, the war in Gaza must come to an immediate end, and the massive delivery of humanitarian aid must resume immediately. There is no justification for starvation and for the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs. Freedom of movement of Palestinians in and throughout Gaza must be wholly restored, and the forced displacement of the Palestinian population is simply unacceptable. The destruction of Palestinian homes and properties in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, must come to a full halt. Likewise, settlement building in occupied land has to end, and settler violence against Palestinians has to be stopped. All hostages in Gaza must be released immediately and without any condition. The horror of the October the 7th attacks cannot be forgotten. Terrorism can never be justified. Excellencies, we thank the co-organizers, Saudi Arabia and France, for this very timely high-level ministerial meeting. Portugal reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the two-state solution. We have for the last 50 years consistently voted in favor of all resolutions pertaining to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We maintain our political and our financial support to UNRWA. We reiterate our full support for the Palestinian Authority, for its empowerment and its capacitation. Only the Palestinian Authority grants the effective implementation of the two-state solution. We repudiate any decision that entails or envisages the annexation or occupation of the West Bank or Gaza Strip, either it is full or partial. We welcome the Arab Recovery and Reconstruction Plan presented at the Cairo Summit. We welcome the willingness of so many Arab countries to recognize Israel and to normalize relations with Israel upon the condition of the acceptance of two-state solution. We welcome the effective and unprecedented commitment by the Palestinian Authority to some essential conditions that are key to enable the two-state solution and to the recognition of Palestine. First, condemnation of terrorist acts by Hamas and call for its complete disarmament. Second, call for the unconditional and immediate release of hostages and prisoners. Third, commitment to internal institutional reform and to the organization of elections in the near future. Fourth, acceptance of the principle of a demilitarized Palestinian state. 5, readiness to resume the full administration and control of Gaza Strip. And 6th, recognition of the State of Israel and its security needs. These commitments of the Palestinian Authority are truly meaningful. Actually, these commitments substantiate a new step towards the implementation of the two-state solution. There is no doubt that this declaration of the Palestinian Authority, combined with the new position of so many states of the region towards Israel and its right to existence, in the very context of this conference, marks a turning point. Excellencies, an old Palestinian proverb says, kinship is kinship, but humanity is closer. Indeed, may the lessons of such a long suffering in the Middle East finally inspire a renewed collective sense of humanity and belief in peace, so that, as written in the Pirkei Avot, the world can stand on 3 things: justice, truth, and peace. Palestinian wisdom tells us that humanity is closer than kinship. Israeli wisdom reminds us justice, truth, and peace are the pillars of the world. Only a Palestinian state living side by side with Israel in peace, security, and prosperity can bring justice, truth, and peace to humanity. The war must end. Death, captivity, illness, and suffering must stop.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires étrangères du
I
Portugal.
thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of
Et je donne maintenant
Portugal.
la parole à
I
son
now give the
Excellence
floor
Madame
to Her Excellency Rosa Yolanda
ministre des
Villavicencio,
Affaires étrangères par intérim de
Acting
Colombie.
Minister for Foreign Affairs of Colombia.
Ya. Buenos días,
Good
señores
morning,
copresidentes, señores
distinguished
delegados,
co-chairs, distinguished
excelencias
delegates,
todos.
excellencies.
Mientras estamos aquí reunidos,
While we are
cientos de
meeting here,
personas mueren en
hundreds
Gaza.
of people are
El
dying in
mundo
Gaza.
observa con
The
horror
world is
el
watching with
desarrollo de
horror
una campaña de
as a
limpieza
campaign of
étnica
ethnic
en
cleansing
contra
is
de
rolled out
niños,
against
mujeres,
children, women,
ancianos,
older
personas
persons,
enfermas y
the
heridas,
sick and
que
wounded,
viola las normas
a
más
campaign that is
fundamentales
violating
del
the
derecho
most basic norms
internacional.
of international law.
Julio ha sido el mes más
July
mortífero
was the
para la
most deadly
población de
month
Gaza
for the
en los
population of
últimos
Gaza
18
in the
meses.
past 18
Según
months.
informaciones
According
confiables,
to reliable
en promedio
information,
más de 100
on average,
palestinos
more than
fueron
100
asesinados por
Palestinians were
Israel cada
killed
día
by
de este
Israel
mes.
each day
Hay
this month.
10.000 nuevos heridos.
10,000
Las
more
cifras
people have
demuestran
been
que
injured.
pese a
The
la
figures
presión
show that
internacional,
despite international
Israel ha
pressure,
recrudecido
Israel
su
has
violencia.
increased its
Estamos
violence.
viendo indicadores
We are seeing
similares a los de
indicators
febrero
similar to
de
those from February
2024.
2024.
Basta ya.
Enough is
La
enough.
franja de Gaza
The
está
Gaza Strip
incomunicada.
is cut off
No
from
hay alimentos
communications.
ni agua
There is
potable.
no food nor
No hay
drinking
atención
water,
médica.
no medical
Los
care.
niños no van a la
Children are
escuela.
not going to
La
school.
vacunación ha sido
Vaccination
bloqueada
has been
y el
paralyzed,
ingreso de ayuda
and the entry
humanitaria
of humanitarian assistance
obstaculizado.
has been
El
blocked.
hambre se sumó al arsenal de
Hunger has been
guerra
added to
israelí y
Israel's
ahora
arsenal of
la
war, and
población de
now
Gaza
the
también
population
está
of
muriendo
Gaza
de
is also
inanición.
dying of
Basta
starvation.
ya.
Enough
Y en
is enough.
Cisjordania,
And
la
in the West
violencia de
Bank,
los colonos,
settler
avalada y
violence,
fomentada
endorsed
por la
and
potencia
encouraged by
ocupante,
the occupying power,
impone un
is
régimen de
imposing a
terror que
regime of
desafía
terror
de
that
forma abierta
openly
el derecho
defies international
internacional.
law.
Basta ya.
Enough is enough.
Demandamos un cese
We
al
call
fuego
for
inmediato,
an immediate,
permanente
permanent,
e
and
incondicional y el
unconditional
fin de la
ceasefire
ocupación
and the
ilegal.
end of the illegal
No podemos
occupation.
continuar
We cannot
indiferentes
remain
viendo cómo se
indifferent
vuelve
in the
normal
face
la
of the
violación
normalization
sistemática
of the
de las
systematic
normas más
violation
básicas de
of
la
the most basic
convivencia
norms
humana.
of human
Basta
coexistence.
ya.
Enough
Con
is
el
enough.
desdén con el que viene
With
tratando
the
sus
disdain
obligaciones
with which it has been
internacionales,
addressing its
Israel
international
pretende
obligations,
destruir varias
Israel is
décadas de
intending to
progreso
destroy
humano,
various decades, several
reflejado
decades
en
of
el
human
sistema
progress, as
basado en
reflected
reglas
in
que
the
dio
rules-based
origen a las
system
Naciones
that gave
Unidas.
rise to the
El
United
mundo no puede
Nations.
regresar
The world
a
cannot
tolerar
go
el
back
uso del
to
hambre
tolerating
como
the use
método
of
de
hunger
guerra
as a
o el
method of
apartheid
war, or
como sistema de
apartheid as a system
segregación
of
y
segregation
explotación.
and
Basta
exploitation.
ya.
Enough
Colombia
is enough.
reafirma su
Colombia
respaldo
reaffirms
histórico
its
a
historic
una salida
support
política
for a
pacífica,
peaceful,
justa,
just,
definitiva e
definitive,
integral
and
a la
comprehensive
cuestión
political
palestina,
solution to the
fundamentada
question
en
of
la
Palestine,
solución de
one
dos
that is based
estados
on the
que
solution
convivan
of two
uno
states
junto al otro
living
en paz
side by
y
side
seguridad,
in peace and
dentro de
security,
fronteras
within
seguras e
secure and
internacionalmente
internationally
reconocidas
recognized
previas a
pre-1967
1967,
borders, and
reconociendo el
recognizing
inalienable
the
derecho al
inalienable right
retorno de
to
los
return
refugiados
of
palestinos.
Palestinian refugees.
Pero cuando hablamos de la
But
solución
when
de
we
dos
speak of the
estados,
two-state
tenemos que
solution,
ser
we have to be
claros.
clear.
No puede tratarse de un arreglo
This cannot
cosmético
be
que
a cosmetic
legitime la
fix
ocupación.
that
El
legitimizes the
Estado
occupation.
palestino debe ser
The
una entidad
Palestinian state
política
must
soberana,
be
viable
a
y
viable,
debe tener
sovereign
las mismas
political entity,
condiciones
and it must
que
have the
cualquiera
same
de los
conditions
países que
as any of the
participamos
countries
en esta
participating in
conferencia.
this conference.
Debe poseer un gobierno
It must
propio,
possess its own
capacidad para
government,
defenderse
the ability
y
to
para
defend
proteger a
itself
su
and to
población.
protect its
Total
population,
jurisdicción sobre
total
su
jurisdiction
territorio
over
y
its
su
territory
espacio
and its
aéreo,
airspace,
control de sus fronteras
control of
y
its
la
borders,
posibilidad de administrar
and the chance
sus
to
recursos
administer its
naturales.
natural resources.
No puede tolerarse
We cannot tolerate
condicionamientos al pleno
conditions
ejercicio
being
del
attached to
derecho
the full
a la libre
exercise of the right
determinación
to
de los
self-determination of the
palestinos. El Estado
Palestinians.
palestino
The
se ha
Palestinian
declarado
state
amable con la
has
paz
declared
y
itself
por
to be
lo
peace-loving,
tanto
and
debe ser
therefore it should be
admitido
admitted
como miembro
as
pleno
a
de esta
full member of
organización
this
sin más
organization
demoras.
without further
Mientras
delay.
eso sucede,
In
es
the meantime,
obligación de todos
it
los
is the
estados
obligation of
tomar
all
medidas
states
para
to take
contrarrestar
measures to
esta
counter
catástrofe
this
humanitaria.
humanitarian
No es hora de
catastrophe.
hacer más discursos.
Now is not the time
Basta
for
ya.
more speeches.
Colombia
Enough
ha
is
mostrado
enough.
que cree
Colombia
en los
has
hechos,
shown
no en las
that it believes
palabras.
in facts and
Rompimos
not in
relaciones
words. We
diplomáticas
broke
con el
off
gobierno
diplomatic relations
genocida de
with
Tel
the
Aviv
genocidal
y hemos
government in Tel
decidido
Aviv,
dejar de
and we
venderle
decided to
nuestro
stop
carbón.
selling it our coal.
Estamos participando
We are
como terceros
participating as
interesados
an interested
en el
third party
proceso sobre el
in
genocidio
the genocide
que llevó
case brought
Sudáfrica
by
a
South
la
Africa
Corte
at the
Internacional de
International Court
Justicia
of
y
Justice.
coayudamos en
And
los
we have
procesamientos de
contributed to
líderes
the
israelíes
proceedings
en curso
on
ante la
Israeli
Corte Penal
leaders currently underway
Internacional.
at the International
Creamos junto
Criminal
con
Court.
Sudáfrica
Together
el
with
Grupo
South
de la
Africa,
Haya,
we
una
created the
plataforma para
Hague
la
Group,
acción
which
y
is
la
a platform
búsqueda
for
de
action
justicia.
and the pursuit of
Instamos
justice.
a todos los
We urge
países a
all
unirse a
countries
estas
to join
iniciativas
these
y a
initiatives
adoptar
and to
medidas
adopt
similares.
similar measures.
Esperamos que esta
We
conferencia
hope that this
sirva
conference
para
will
galvanizar
serve to
el respaldo
galvanize the
internacional
necessary
necesario que
international
permita
support
una
that
solución
will allow
política
for a
definitiva a la
definitive
cuestión de
political solution
Palestina,
to the
con
question of
base en el
Palestine,
derecho que
one
tienen
that is
ambos
based on the
estados
right
a la
of both states
autodeterminación
to
y a vivir en
self-determination
paz.
and to live in
Gracias.
peace. Thank you.
Je remercie les ministres des Affaires étrangères par
I
intérim de
thank
la
the
Colombie.
Acting Minister for Foreign Affairs of Colombia.
Et je donne maintenant la parole
I give
à
the
Son
floor
Excellence Monsieur
to
Luca
His
Beccari,
Excellency Luca Beccari,
ministre des Affaires
Minister
étrangères,
for
des
Foreign
Affaires
Affairs,
politiques, de la
Political
coopération
Affairs,
économique internationale et de
International
la
Economic
transition numérique
Cooperation and
de
Digital
Saint-Martin,
Transition of San Marino.
de Saint-Martin.
Co-Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleague, on behalf of the government of the Republic of San Marino, I would like to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the French Republic for co-chairing this high-level conference at a time when the need for moral clarity and political courage has never been greater. San Marino condemned unequivocally the attack of the 7th October, which caused tragic loss of innocent life. At the same time, we cannot remain silent in the face of a disproportionate military response that has followed, marked by widespread destruction, civilian suffering, and severe humanitarian consequences, including the lack of access of food, clean water, and essential supply, raising the alarming risk of famine. This constitutes a grave violation of international law and international humanitarian law. It is incumbent on both parties to strictly respect these fundamental norms, protect civilians, and preserve the possibility of a just and lasting peace. We come together not only as representatives of our government, but as human beings. The Secretary General of the United Nations recently spoke of a collective moral failure in the face of the catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. This word must resonate with us. More than 50,000 lives lost, including thousands of children. A society torn apart. A people deprived of dignity, security, and hope. The tragic death of UN and UNRWA staff members, humanitarian workers, and journalists must not be tolerated. This is not only a political crisis. It is a test of our shared humanity. San Marino stands unequivocally for an immediate and lasting ceasefire, for unconditional release of hostages, for the protection of civilians, and for the full humanitarian access in accordance with international humanitarian law. At the same time, continued expansion of illegal settlement violence against civilians and other unilateral action in the West Bank, which threatened the viability of a future Palestinian state and undermined the prospect for peace. The unity and territorial continuity between the West Bank and Gaza under the Palestinian Authority are essential and any meaningful two-state solution. However, we must look beyond the immediate emergency. It is time to reignite the political horizon. San Marino reaffirmed its unwavering support for a two-state solution as a sovereign, independent, and viable state of Palestine, living in peace and mutual recognition alongside the State of Israel, both within secure internationally recognized border and with Jerusalem as a shared capital. We believe that peace is not only possible, but necessary and achievable if the international community acts with unity and resolve. In this spirit, we support a multilateral framework led by the United Nations, building on the Madrid terms of reference, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the Peace Day effort, underpinned by strong international guarantees and credible security arrangements for all. Co-Chair, on 15 May 2025, the Parliament of San Marino adopted unanimously an historical recommendation committing the government of the Republic to recognize the State of Palestine by the end of this year. This is not a symbolic act. It is an outcome of deep reflection and a principled stance grounded in the values that define our Republic: the rejection of war, the right of people to self-determination, and the primacy of international law. The recognition process has already begun. The Ambassador of Palestine has formally presented her letter of credence to the Captain Regent, our head of state. The next step will be the appointment of a San Marino ambassador accredited to Palestine, establishing full diplomatic relations. We will also continue to support Palestine's full membership in the United Nations, as well as to affirm the need of international organization presence to deliver full and safe humanitarian assistance, especially for children, women, and the most vulnerable. San Marino urges all nations to take coordinated and courageous steps. We cannot allow violence, despair, and extremism to shape the future. We must act now to build a peace grounded in dignity, accountability, and mutual recognition. Co-chairs, San Marino believes that the value of the just peace and human dignity know no border. We stand ready to accompany this irreversible process, ensuring full respect for international law, compliance by all, and sustained engagement through credible multilateral mechanisms. Let this conference be remembered not as a missed opportunity, but as a turning point. Let us replace cynicism with determination and silence with action, by implementing the two-state solution and by defining a common framework for the recognition of the State of Palestine, with clear, shared milestones that can encourage all nations to take meaningful steps forward. Thank you.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires étrangères,
I
des Affaires
thank the
politiques,
Minister for
de la
Foreign
coopération
Affairs, Political
économique
Affairs,
internationale et de la
International
transition numérique
Economic
de
Cooperation and
Saint-Marin.
Digital Transition of San Marino.
Et je donne maintenant la parole
I give the
à
floor
son Excellence
to
M.
His
Abdullah
Excellency
Ali
Abdullah
Al-Yahya,
Ali Al-Yahya,
ministre des Affaires
Minister
étrangères
for Foreign
du Koweït.
Affairs of Kuwait.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of God, most
صاحب السمو
compassionate, most
الأمير فيصل بن
merciful,
فرحان آل سعود وزير خارجية
Your
المملكة
Highness,
العربية السعودية،
Prince,
معالي جون
Al
نويل
Saouda,
باورو
Minister
وزير
of
أوروبا
Foreign Affairs
والشؤون
of the
الخارجية
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia,
في الجمهورية
and
الفرنسية،
Minister
أصحاب
Barrot,
المعالي
the Minister of
والسعادة
Foreign Affairs of the French
والسيدات
Republic.
والسادة الكرام،
Your Excellencies,
السلام عليكم
distinguished
ورحمة
ladies
الله
and gentlemen,
وبركاته.
may the peace of God be upon you.
يسعدني في مستهل
At
كلمتي
the
أن
outset,
أتقدم بخالص
I would like
الشكر
to extend my
والتقدير
sincere
إلى
thanks
المملكة
and
العربية السعودية
appreciation to the
والجمهورية
Kingdom of Saudi
الفرنسية
Arabia and
على
to the
تنظيم
French
هذا
Republic
الاجتماع المهم،
for
كما
convening
أشكر
this
رئاسة
important
الجمعية
conference. I
العامة
would also
ومعالي
like to
الأمين
thank the
العام
Presidency
على
of
ما
the General
بذلوه من
Assembly and
جهود
His
كبيرة
Excellency the
لضمان
Secretary
حسن
General
التنظيم
for
والإعداد.
their great efforts to
نجتمع
guarantee
اليوم
the
تحت
organization and
وطأة
preparation
ظروف
of this conference.
استثنائية
We
ومأساوية
meet today
تمر
while
بها
exceptional
الأراضي
and tragic
الفلسطينية
circumstances
وتحديد قطاع
continue to
غزة
unfold
الذي
in the
يتعرض
Palestinian
لعدوان
territory,
عسكري
especially
إسرائيلي
the Gaza
غير
Strip.
مسبوق
Gaza is
خلف
being
العشرات
subjected
من
to
الآلاف من
unprecedented
الشهداء
Israeli military
غالبيتهم من
aggression,
النساء
with which has
والأطفال
claimed dozens
ودمارا
of thousands of
واسعا
martyrs,
طال
most of whom
البنية
are women
التحتية
and children, and
والمستشفيات
extensive
والمدارس
destruction of
ومرافق المياه
infrastructures,
والكهرباء
hospitals,
وحتى
schools,
الملاجئ.
water and electricity
إن
facilities,
الحصار
and even
الجائر
shelters.
المفروض على غزة وقطع
The
الغذاء
oppressive
والدواء
blockade on Gaza
والكهرباء
and the
والمياه
denial of food,
نتج عنه
medicine,
كارثة
electricity
إنسانية
and
تهدد
water have
الحياة
led to a
أكثر من
humanitarian
مليونين إنسان
catastrophe that
معظمهم من
threatens the
المدنيين
lives of
الأبرياء
more than 2
وقد
million
تجاوز
people, most of
هذه
whom
الأوضاع
are innocent
حدود المأساة
civilians.
لتتحول إلى تحد صريح
This has
للضمير
exceeded
الإنساني
a
والقانون
catastrophe has
الدولي.
become a
أن استمرار
challenge
التمادي
to the
العسكري
human conscience.
وتجاهل المبادئ
The continued
الإنسانية
humanitarian
والقانونية
aggression and
يعد
the disregard
تراخيا
for
من المجتمع
humanitarian and
الدولي
legal principles
عن أداء
represents an
مسؤولياته
inability of the
ويشجع من
international
الانفلات
community
من
to
العقاب.
perform
ومن
its
هنا
duties, and it
تبرز الحاجة
encourages
الماسة إلى
impunity.
تحرك دولي فوري
Therefore, there is an
وفعال
urgent need for
وانطلاقا من
immediate and
ثوابت دولة
effective
الكويت
international
التاريخي
action. And
والراسخة
based on the
نود
state of
التأكيد
Kuwait's
على
historical and firm principles,
على
we
المواقف
would
التالية.
like to
أولا
reiterate the following
الاعتراف
positions.
الكامل
First,
بدولة
full
فلسطين ضمن
recognition
الحدود
of the
الرابع
state
من
of
يونيو
Palestine within the borders of
1967
June 4th,
وعاصمتها القدس
1967,
الشرقية.
with East
ونرحب
Jerusalem
في هذا السياق
as its
بالخطوات المتخذة
capital.
مؤخرا
In this context,
من
we
عدد من
welcome the
الدول
recent steps by
وندعو
several
الدول
states
التي لم
to
تعترف
recognize
بعد
the
إلى
state of
اتخاذ الخطوة
Palestine,
ذاتها
and we call on
باعتبار
the
ذلك
states who have
أساسا
not yet done so
لتحقيق
to
العدالة
do so
والسلام.
as a basis
ثانيا
for
الوقف
justice and
الفوري
peace.
والشامل
Second,
للعدوان
immediate
الإسرائيلي
and
على قطاع
comprehensive
غزة
halt
وكافة الأراضي
of
الفلسطينية
the Israeli
المحتلة
aggression against
ووقف
Gaza
استهداف
and all
المدنيين
the occupied
والبنية
Palestinian
التحتية
territory,
وضمان
and
عدم
to
تكرار
end the
مثل هذه
targeting of
الأفعال
civilians and
الإجرامية.
infrastructure, and to guarantee the
ثالثا فتح
non-recurrence
جميع
of
المعابر
such crimes.
بشكل دائم وغير
Third,
مشروط
the
بما
permanent and
يضمن تدفق
unconditional
المساعدات
opening of all
الإنسانية
crossings to
والطبية
guarantee the
وتمكين
flow of
عمليات الإغاثة
humanitarian and
إلى
medical
الوصول
aid,
إلى
and
مستحقيها
enabling
دون
relief
صعوبات.
operations to reach
رابعا
the
رفض
persons in
كافة
need
أشكال
without
التهجير
difficulty.
القسري
Fourth,
الذي
we
يستهدف
reject
تغيير
all
الواقع
forms
الديموغرافي
of forced
في الأراضي
displacement
الفلسطينية
aimed at changing
ونؤكد
the
على حق
demographic
اللاجئين
reality in the
الفلسطينيين في
Palestinian
العودة
territory.
إلى ديارهم
And we
وفق
affirm the
القرار
right of
الأممي
Palestinian refugees to return
1994.
home in accordance with UN
خامسا دعم
Resolution
الحكومة الفلسطينية
194.
ومؤسساتها
Fifth,
الوطنية وتوسيع
supporting the
سلطتها
Palestinian
على كامل
government
الأراضي
and its
الفلسطينية
institutions, and
باعتبار ذلك
expanding
خطوة
its
أساسية
authority over the
لبناء
entire
دولة فلسطينية
Palestinian
مستقلة.
territory as a fundamental
سادسا
step in
ضمان
building an
حماية
independent
المدنيين ووقف
Palestinian state.
الانتهاكات ومحاسبة
Sixth,
مرتكبي الجرائم
ensuring the
أمام
protection of
المحكمة
civilians,
العدل
ending the
الدولية
violations,
وتفعيل
holding
آليات
perpetrators
العدالة
accountable
الدولية
before the
ضمان عدم
ICJ,
الإفلات
and
من
enabling the
العقاب.
international justice
سابعا
mechanisms
دعم
to
كافة الجهود
guarantee the
السياسية
lack of
والدبلوماسية
impunity. Seventh,
لإحياء
supporting all
عملية
political
السلام
and diplomatic
وفق
efforts
القرارات
to
الشرعية
revive the peace
الدولية
process in
مبادرة
accordance with
السلام
UN
العربية
resolutions,
لعام
the Arab Peace
2002
Initiative of 2002,
ورفض كافة
and
السياسات التي
rejecting all
تؤخر
policies that
تحقيق
delay
حل
the
الدولتين.
two-state solution.
سيداتي والسادة تؤمن دولة الكويت
Ladies and
بأن
gentlemen,
السلام
the state of
العادل
Kuwait
والشامل
believes
لا
that a
يمكن
just
أن
and
يتحقق
comprehensive peace
دون إنهاء
cannot
الاحتلال
be achieved
الإسرائيلي
without
وتمكين
ending
الشعب
the Israeli
الفلسطيني من
occupation
نيل كافة
and
حقوق
enabling the
المشروعة
Palestinian
وأن
people
الصمت
of
على
gaining their
الجرائم
legitimate
المرتكبة
rights.
في
The
غزة
time
التي
has
تشمل
come for the
ممارسات
international
بلغت
community
حدا
to end the
يعد
recurring
تواطؤا مع
tragedy
الجلاد
and to act
ضد
to
الضحية.
protect the innocent, to
لقد
stop
آن الأوان للمجتمع
the
الدولي أن يضع حدا لهذه
aggression
المأساة المتكررة
and
ويتحرك
to
لحماية
end
الأبرياء
the siege
ووقف العدوان وإنهاء
and
الحصار
force
وإلزام
the
الاحتلال
Israeli
الإسرائيلي
occupation
باحترام
to
القانون الدولي
respect
الإنساني.
international humanitarian
إننا
law.
اليوم
We are
نشهد
witnessing a tragic
أننا أمام مشهد إنساني مفجع لا يقبله
humanitarian
الضمير الحي
situation that
حيث
no
يقتل
living conscience
الأبرياء
can accept.
على أبواب
Innocent people are
المستشفيات
killed
وتجفف
at the gates
الملاجئ
of
وتحرم
hospitals,
غزة من
and
الماء
Gaza is being
والغذاء
deprived of
والدواء
water, food,
فهل
and
من
medicine.
مغيث
Will there be a
وهل
savior?
من نصير
Will there be
لأهل
a
غزة.
supporter for the people of
والسلام
Gaza?
عليكم
May the
ورحمة
peace
الله
of God
وبركاته.
be upon you.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires étrangères
I
du
thank the
Koweït.
Minister for Foreign Affairs of Kuwait.
Je donne maintenant la parole
I give the floor now
à son Excellence Monsieur
to
Touhid
His
Hussein,
Excellency Mr. Touhid
conseiller
Hussein,
aux affaires étrangères du
advisor
gouvernement
for the
provisoire du
Ministry of
Bangladesh.
Foreign Affairs of the Interim Government of Bangladesh.
Co-chairs, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, I thank the co-chairs, France and Saudi Arabia, for convening this high-level conference at the time when unity and urgency are more important than ever in advancing the discourse on peace and justice in Palestine. In this respect, I also commend the unwavering commitment and diligence of the 8 working group members. Excellencies, Bangladesh approaches this conference with moral clarity and a solemn sense of responsibility. Our Constitution commits us to stand with those who face oppression and affirms the right of people to self-determination. From our liberation war in 1971 to the recent mass uprising in July and August last year, the people of Bangladesh always pursued the right to self-determination. That legacy shapes our empathy and enduring solidarity with the Palestinian people in their legitimate aspirations for an independent, sovereign state. Co-chairs, we reaffirm our steadfast support for the establishment of a viable and independent state of Palestine based on pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We believe peace in the Middle East cannot be achieved without justice for Palestine, and justice cannot be delivered without implementing their two-state solution, the only viable and internationally recognized path forward, based on international law, relevant UN resolutions, and the aspirations of the people of Palestine. We strongly endorse the initiative of the Global Alliance for the implementation of the two-state solution. The consensus must now be translated into concrete, time-bound action. Excellencies, to turn this vision into reality, we must urgently address two core challenges. First, the conditions on the ground. A just and meaningful two-state solution requires a clear and contiguous Palestine territory. Today, that possibility is being disrupted through the expansion of illegal settlements in West Bank and the systematic erosion of Palestinian presence in East Jerusalem. Bangladesh calls for full compliance with international law in line with the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice issued on 19 July 2024, ending Israel's unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. Second, flagrant violation of international humanitarian law unfolding since October 2023, which is unprecedented in scale and gravity. More than 58,000 Palestinians have lost their lives and many more have been injured, most of them women and children. Schools, hospitals and aid camps are under attack by IDF, with countless bodies lying beneath rubble in Gaza. We are undoubtedly witnessing one of the gravest genocides of our time. Bangladesh condemns this genocidal killing in Gaza and calls for accountability of the perpetrators. Use of starvation as a weapon by Israel is absolutely not acceptable. Co-chairs, words alone will not heal the sufferings of the Palestinian people. Our actions must be visible. From this conference, we simply cannot go back to where we were. Our topmost priority should be executing an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza, and to ensure the urgent, sufficient and unhindered delivery of essential supplies and services throughout the Gaza Strip. UNRWA should be strengthened and any attempt to hinder its operations should be resisted. Civilians, aid workers and medical personnel must be allowed immediate, safe access. We also need to mobilize new resources and funding to address the humanitarian crisis and to implement an effective and sustainable reconstruction of Gaza. We stand ready to join any UN-led efforts for rebuilding Gaza by deploying personnel to support humanitarian and future reconstruction plan. Co-chairs, we reiterate our call for the full recognition and membership of the State of Palestine in the United Nations. The implementation of the two-state solution must begin now. We must act with urgency and courage to uphold international law, international humanitarian law, and the UN Charter. Let us reaffirm our collective commitment and take our position to the right side of history. Thank you all.
Je remercie le conseiller aux affaires étrangères du gouvernement provisoire du
I
Bangladesh.
thank the advisor for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the interim government of
Et je donne maintenant la
Bangladesh.
parole
I now give the
à
floor
Madame, à son
to
Excellence Madame
Her Excellency
Ima Torfaus,
Ima Torfaus,
ministre des Affaires
Minister
étrangères
for Foreign
d'Andorre.
Affairs of Andorra.
Monsieur le Président,
Co-chairs,
Excellences,
Excellencies,
Mesdames et Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen,
je tiens en premier
at the
lieu à
outset,
saluer la
I
tenue
would
de
like to
cette
welcome
conférence de
the
haut
convening
niveau
of
à
this
un moment
high-level conference at a
après
time
presque 2 années de
following
guerre à Gaza,
almost 2
la
years of
souffrance
war
de la
in
société
Gaza,
civile
the
a
suffering
atteint son
of
paroxysme.
civil society is at fever pitch.
Alors que le monde entier
At a
s'émeut
time
de la
when the
situation
world
humanitaire
is
dans la région,
deeply upset by the humanitarian situation in the
représentants
region,
des États membres des
we,
Nations Unies,
representatives of United Nations
avons
member
le
States,
devoir
have
moral
a
et
moral
politique
and a political
de créer
duty
les
to
conditions
establish
d'une paix
the conditions
durable
for
au
lasting
Moyen-Orient.
peace in the Middle East,
Cette région qui
a
vit
region
un calvaire
which is
depuis des
undergoing
décennies.
this
Le
ordeal
moment est
for
venu
decades
de
now.
régler la question de la Palestine.
The time has come
Et
to
ce
settle the
règlement,
question of
pour
Palestine.
nous,
This
ne peut
settlement,
passer
in our
que
view,
par la mise en
can
œuvre
only
de la
occur
solution des
through
deux
the
États.
implementation of the two-state solution.
L'Andorre soutient pleinement
Andorra
cette
fully
solution
supports
fondée
this
sur le
solution,
droit
a
international
solution
et les
underpinned by
conditions
international law
établies, entre
and the
autres,
conditions
dans les
set
résolutions
forth
successives
inter
de
alia
l'ONU
in
et l'initiative
successive
de paix de
United Nations
Madrid.
resolutions as well as the Madrid Peace Initiative. Andorra,
de paix,
drawing on
a
its
été
700-year
très
history
attaché au
of peace,
principe de
has
neutralité.
historically
Au
been
cours
deeply
de ces
committed
deux
to the
dernières
principle of
années,
neutrality.
nous avons
Over the last
suivi
2
avec
years,
beaucoup d'inquiétude la
we've
situation au
followed
Moyen-Orient
with great
et
disquiet
tout
the situation unfolding in the Middle
à
East,
Gaza.
and in
Les
particular the situation
violations
in Gaza.
répétées du droit
Repeated
international
violations
et
of
du droit
international
humanitaire
law as well as
nous ont
humanitarian
conduit
law
à une
have led
neutralité
us
active.
to a position of active
Si nous
neutrality.
avons condamné avec fermeté et de façon
We
réitérée
firmly
les
and
attaques
repeatedly
terroristes
condemned
perpétrées
the
par le
terrorist
Hamas en
attacks
Israël le 7
perpetrated by
octobre
Hamas in
2023
Israel on the 7th of
et
October
demandé
2023.
la libération
We've
des
called
otages,
for the release of
nous
hostages.
avons aussi
At the same time,
profondément regretté
we've
la
expressed
violence de la réponse à
deep
ces
regret
attaques
at
et
just how
l'agression
violent the response to these
indiscriminée aux
attacks is.
populations civiles avec
We also
presque
regretted
60 000
indiscriminate
victimes,
attacks on civilians,
majoritairement des femmes
which have claimed the
et
lives
des
of
enfants.
almost
Cette
60,000 people,
spirale de
the
violence
majority of them
qui a
women
engendré
and
une
children.
situation
This
humanitaire
spiral of violence
catastrophique
has resulted in a
avec
catastrophic
l'obstruction de
humanitarian
l'accès à l'aide
situation
des populations
with
civiles déjà
access
éprouvées
to civilians
et, je
already
le répète,
facing a terrible situation
insoutenable.
obstructed. The
L'Andorre,
situation
une
is,
fois de
let me
plus,
repeat it,
appelle à un
unbearable.
cessez-le-feu immédiat et durable
Andorra would like to once
et au
again call
respect
for
du
an immediate
droit
and lasting
humanitaire
ceasefire as well as
international,
respect for
ainsi qu'à la
international
libération
humanitarian law,
inconditionnelle
as well as
de
the
tous les
unconditional
otages.
release of all hostages.
Nous avons soutenu les
We've
résolutions
supported
adoptées par
the
l'Assemblée
resolutions
générale des
adopted
Nations
by the
Unies
United Nations
qui
General
appellent à la
Assembly,
protection des
resolutions
civils,
calling for the
à la
protection of
garantie
civilians,
d'un accès sûr
for
et
a
sans
guarantee of
entrave à l'aide
safe and
humanitaire à Gaza,
unfettered access
ainsi
for
qu'à la
humanitarian
protection du
aid going
personnel
into Gaza,
humanitaire,
as well as for the protection
conformément au
of
droit
humanitarian
international.
personnel,
Dans
in
ce
accordance
cadre,
with
nous
international
réitérons
law.
notre plein
Against this
soutien
backdrop,
à
we'd like to
l'UNRWA,
reiterate
qui
our full
compte
support
de
for
nombreuses
UNRWA,
victimes dans son
which has
personnel
many
humanitaire.
of its
Pour nous,
humanitarian workers
l'UNRWA
among the
reste
victims.
un acteur
In our view,
indispensable
UNRWA
sur le terrain.
remains an indispensable
Mesdames et
actor in
messieurs,
the field.
l'agression n'est jamais
Ladies
la
and gentlemen,
solution. La
aggression
violence
is never the
n'est
solution.
jamais la solution.
Violence
La
is
terreur
never the
n'est
answer.
jamais la solution.
Terror is never
La
the solution.
solution
The
est dans le
solution lies
dialogue.
in
La
dialogue.
solution doit
The
passer
solution
par le
requires
respect du droit
respect for
international.
international law.
L'Andorre s'est déjà exprimé
Andorra
en faveur
has
de l'appartenance de la
already
Palestine en
spoken
tant que
in
membre
favor
de
of
plein droit de notre
Palestine becoming a
organisation.
fully fledged member of
Un
our
dialogue
organization.
constructif qui
Constructive
réunit
dialogue,
tous
bringing
les
together
acteurs dans les mêmes
all
conditions autour
actors
de la
under the
table
same conditions,
ne peut
bringing
qu'être
them to the
bénéfique
table,
pour
can only
parvenir
be of
à une
benefit.
solution durable. Nous sommes
benefit for a lasting
disposés
solution.
maintenant à accomplir
We
un
stand
pas
ready
supplémentaire
to take an
et
additional
le
step.
gouvernement travaille pour être en mesure
government
de
is working
reconnaître prochainement
so
l'État
that
de Palestine.
in the near future we can be in a position to
Messieurs les
recognize
présidents,
the state
depuis
of
l'adoption
Palestine.
de la résolution
Co-chairs,
79-81
since the adoption of Resolution 79/81 by the General Assembly in December of last year, the 8 working groups working under your auspices have considered the various aspects, paving the way for peace in the Middle East on a viable and robust basis. As we prepare to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, it is high time to renew and to reiterate our commitments to the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. This conference is the time to prove that we are actors forging effective and inclusive multilateralism. Multilateralism which goes beyond our differences and allows us to come up with solutions to complex crises, I stand convinced that we will manage to garner the necessary consensus to achieve a viable solution, together with a realistic roadmap and the means for effective action. I thank you.
Je remercie la ministre des Affaires étrangères
I thank
d'Andorre.
the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Andorra.
Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence Madame Torgerdur Katrin Gunnarsdóttir, ministre des Affaires étrangères de
l'Islande.
Distinguished co-chairs, dear colleagues, Iceland recognized the independence and sovereignty of the State of Palestine in 2011, being one of the first in Western Europe to do so. Our position then and now is firmly founded in our belief in equal rights of both peoples to self-determination, Israelis and Palestinians, and the conviction that it is the only way forward to build lasting peace and stability in the region. We applaud, of course, France for announcing that they now intend to take the same step here in New York in September, and we encourage others to do the same. There are those who claim that recognition of Palestine is and would be a reward to terrorist groups that oppose peace. I say, however, that recognition is not a gift. It is a rightful affirmation of statehood necessary to enable meaningful negotiation between equals and to give effect to inalienable right of all peoples to self-determination. Mr. Chair, looking back in history, while the conflict which followed the vote in the UN back in 1947 caused great pain and suffering, it also gave rise to the State of Israel and came to represent the fulfilled right of the Jewish people to their own state and their right to self-determination. Incidentally, it fell to Iceland's first permanent representative to the United Nations, Mr. Thors, to present the draft resolution on recommending the two states, one Jewish and one Arab, before the General Assembly. What has, however, been tragically unfulfilled ever since is the other half of the equation, an independent Arab state in Palestine, realizing the right of Palestinians to self-determination. Regrettably, the prospects to two states living side by side in peace and prosperity have diminished over the past decade, especially in the last 20 months, and there are those who want to take it off the table altogether. This distinguished audience cannot stand. As we gather here this week in New York, surely everyone present, as well as those absent, must realize that the situation in Gaza and in the West Bank has long since become unbearable, absolutely unbearable. We simply cannot continue in the same vein. We need to turn to the solution recognized as the only sustainable solution to this most difficult of issues, the two-state solution. We must reaffirm that the people of Israel have the right to live in peace and security, free from terrorism, incitement, and free from hate. And equally, the Palestinian people also have the right to live in dignity, with sovereignty, on their own land, within internationally recognized borders, free from violence, oppression, and occupation. Mr. Chair, Iceland condemned in the strongest terms the heinous terrorist attack by Hamas on 7th of October 2023, and we continue to demand the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. We furthermore agree with President Abbas's important statement in June that Hamas can have no role in the future governance of Gaza or other parts of Palestine. At the same time, we protest unequivocally the unacceptable civilian death toll in Israel's ongoing military campaign in Gaza, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, as well as the prolonged restriction on humanitarian access to Gaza. Israel's military campaign in Gaza is simply an affront to the concept of international law. We also condemn settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank and reject outright the expansion by Israel of its illegal settlements in the West Bank. This is an obvious and blatant annexation designed to obstruct the realization of the two-state solution and contradicts international law. The advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice has given us a very clear compass. No state may recognize changes imposed by force or through occupation, including in East Jerusalem, except through mutual agreement. Co-chairs, the future state of Palestine must be built on the foundations of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Political and institutional reform may be necessary, but with support from the international community, the state of Palestine can well succeed based on the foundation already erected by the Palestinian Authority and by international partners such as UNRWA. To reconfirm Iceland's continued engagement and support, I'm looking forward to signing a memorandum of understanding with Palestine, which enshrines Iceland's intention to support Palestinians and the strengthening of the Palestinian institutions. And in conclusion, to all the people, the innocent children, women, disabled people, older people, men and families, we say, we see your suffering in this horrific situation. We see your resilience and your right to peace. And to the rest of the world, we say, the time for action is now. Not after more lives are lost, not after more walls go up. The time is right now. Thank you.
Je remercie la ministre des Affaires étrangères de l'Islande. Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Alberto Van Claveren, ministre des Affaires étrangères du Chili.
Señores copresidentes,
Mr.
Altezas, Excelencias,
Your Highness, Excellencies,
permítame comenzar expresando el agradecimiento del Gobierno de Chile a Francia y Arabia Saudita por la convocatoria a esta conferencia y por su liderazgo en la conducción de este proceso. La tragedia que vivimos desde el 7 de octubre del 2023, tras el brutal ataque terrorista de Hamas contra Israel, ha puesto de manifiesto con crudeza la urgencia de romper el ciclo de violencia en el que se ha visto envuelta la región por décadas. Chile ha condenado enérgicamente dicho ataque y ha instado por la liberación inmediata de los rehenes y ha condenado toda forma de violencia contra civiles sin distinción, incluyendo los ataques indiscriminados contra la población palestina en Gaza, cuyo sufrimiento es hoy insoportable. El derecho internacional humanitario establece límites claros, incluso en tiempos de guerra. Ninguna legítima defensa puede justificar el castigo colectivo, la destrucción sistemática de infraestructura civil o la negación de ayuda humanitaria. Las imágenes de mujeres, niños y ancianos atrapados bajo el fuego, asesinados mientras esperaban asistencia o atacados en lugares de culto, como la Iglesia Católica de la Sagrada Familia, nos obligan a alzar la voz y actuar. La comunidad internacional no puede permanecer indiferente. Urge establecer un alto al fuego permanente, inmediato, que ponga fin a las hostilidades, permita el acceso humanitario sin restricciones y, sobre todo, abra paso a una solución política definitiva basado en el derecho internacional y en resoluciones vinculantes de esta organización.
functions of this organization.
Chile reconoce y valora los
Chile
esfuerzos de
recognizes
mediación
and values
llevados
the
adelante
mediation
por
efforts carried
Egipto,
out by
Qatar
Egypt,
y Estados
Qatar,
Unidos
and the
y
United
reafirma
States,
su pleno
and
respaldo
reaffirms its
a
full
la labor de
support for the
UNRWA,
work of
cuya
UNRWA,
importancia
the
en
importance
Gaza
of
es
which in Gaza
insustituible.
is
Su
irreplaceable.
neutralidad
Its
fue validada
neutrality
por
was
la reciente
validated
revisión
by the recent
externa y es
external
imperativo
review,
que los
and it
estados
is essential
aseguren
the states
su
ensure
financiamiento
its
continuo.
ongoing financing.
Al mismo tiempo,
At the
es
same
esencial
time,
fortalecer
it
las
is essential
instituciones
that we strengthen
palestinas que
Palestinian
deberán asumir mayores
institutions which will have to
responsabilidades
take on
en
greater
la administración
responsibilities
civil y en
for
la
civil administration
reconstrucción.
and
A la
reconstruction.
luz de la resolución
In the light
1325
of Resolution
sobre mujeres, paz y
1325
seguridad,
on women, peace and
Chile
security,
también hace un
Chile
llamado
also
a la contribución de las mujeres como
for
actores
the contribution of
relevantes
women as
justamente
relevant
para la
actors
paz.
when it comes to
Señores
peace.
copresidentes, la
Co-chairs,
solución de dos
the
estados
two-state
no es una
solution
aspiración
is not
abstracta,
an abstract
es un
aspiration.
compromiso asumido por la comunidad
It is a
internacional
commitment
hace
made
más
by
de
the
7
international
décadas,
community more than 7
consagrado en
decades
múltiples
ago,
resoluciones de
enshrined
la
in
Asamblea
multiple
General y el
resolutions of the
Consejo de
General
Seguridad.
Assembly and the Security
Hoy,
Council.
lamentablemente, su
Regrettably,
viabilidad
today,
está en
its
riesgo.
viability
La
is in
situación
jeopardy.
en la Cisjordania
The
ocupada,
situation
donde
in the occupied
persisten
West
actos de
Bank,
violencia
where
contra civiles
acts of
y
violence
una
against civilians
preocupante
continue,
expansión de asentamientos
alongside the
ilegales,
worrying expansion of
constituye
illegal
una grave
settlements,
amenaza al derecho
constitutes a grave
internacional
threat to
y a toda
international law
posibilidad
and to
real
any
de una
real
paz
possibility
duradera.
for lasting peace.
La opinión consultiva emitida por
The
la Corte
advisory
Internacional de
opinion issued by
Justicia
the
en
International
julio
Court
de
of Justice in
2024
July
reafirmó de
2024
manera inequívoca la
unequivocally
ilegalidad
reaffirmed
de
the
estas
illegal
prácticas.
nature of these
Chile
practices.
participó activamente en ese
Chile
proceso
actively
y
participated in
suscribe
that case
plenamente las
and fully
conclusiones de la
supports
Corte.
the Court's
Instamos
conclusions.
a todos los
We urge
estados y
all
organismos
states and international
internacionales a
organizations
tomarlas en
to
cuenta
take
y
them on
darles
board
aplicación
and
concreta.
to put them into practice.
Asimismo, Chile intervino ante la
Moreover,
Corte Internacional
Chile
de
intervened
Justicia
before the
en el
International Court of
procedimiento
Justice
iniciado por
in the
Sudáfrica
case brought by
bajo la
South
Convención
Africa
para la
under the
Prevención
Convention
y
for
la
the Prevention
Sanción del
and
Delito de
Punishment of the Crime
Genocidio.
of
Y
Genocide,
junto a México
and
remitió
together
una
with Mexico,
comunicación a la Corte
issued a
Penal
referral to the
Internacional
International
para
Criminal
fortalecer la
Court
investigación
to
de
strengthen the
presuntos crímenes
investigation
de
into
guerra y
presumed
crímenes
war
de
crimes
lesa
and crimes
humanidad.
against humanity.
Nuestro compromiso con la justicia
Our
internacional
commitment
y
to
con la
international
protección de los
justice and
derechos
to the
humanos
protection of human
es
rights
indeclinable.
is unwavering.
Recordamos además
We
que la
also
resolución
recall that Resolution
2735 del Consejo de
2735
Seguridad
of the Security
prohíbe
Council
toda alteración
prohibits
demográfica o
any
territorial
demographic or
en Gaza.
territorial change
La
in
unidad,
Gaza.
contigüidad e
The
integridad
unity,
de los territorios
contiguity, and
palestinos
integrity
ocupados
of the
deben
occupied
ser
Palestinian
respetadas.
territories must be respected.
Exhortamos al gobierno de Israel
We call
a
upon the
detener de
government of
inmediato la
Israel to
expansión de
immediately stop the
asentamientos en
expansion of
Cisjordania
settlements in the
y a
West Bank
cumplir su
and to
obligación como
fulfill its
potencia
obligation
ocupante
as
de
occupying
proteger
power
efectivamente
to
a la
effectively
población
protect
civil
the
bajo
civilian
su
population
control.
under its control.
Señores copresidentes,
Mr.
la única
Co-chairs,
vía sostenible
the only
hacia una paz
sustainable
justa
path
y
towards
duradera
just
del
and
Medio
lasting
Oriente
peace in the
es
Middle
la
East
solución de
is
dos
the
estados,
solution of two
conviviendo
states
en paz y
living
seguridad
together in peace
dentro de
and
fronteras
security
seguras,
within secure,
mutuamente
mutually
reconocidas
recognized
y
and
acordadas,
agreed
y con
borders,
Jerusalén como
and with
futura capital
Jerusalem as the
compartida.
future shared
No puede
capital.
haber seguridad
There
para
can be no
Israel
security
ni
for
dignidad
Israel,
para
nor
el pueblo
dignity for the
palestino si
Palestinian
no se
people
reconoce
if
mutuamente
there is not
sus
mutual
derechos
recognition
fundamentales.
of their
Muchas
fundamental
gracias.
rights. Thank you.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires
I thank
étrangères du
the
Chili
Minister for Foreign Affairs of Chile.
et je donne maintenant la
I now
parole
give the
à son
floor
Excellence
to His
Monsieur
Excellency
Shaya
Shaya
Mohsin
Mohsin
Zindani, ministre
Zindani,
des Affaires étrangères
Minister
et des
of Foreign
expatriés
Affairs
du Yémen.
and Expatriate Affairs of Yemen.
صاحب السمو الأمير فيصل بن فرحان آل سعود
His Highness
وزير خارجية
Saudi
المملكة العربية
Foreign Minister
السعودية
Prince Faisal bin
معالي
Farhan
السيد
Al
ستيفان
Saud,
سرغونيه وزير خارجية جمهورية فرنسا
His Excellency
أصحاب
French Foreign
المعالي
Minister
والسعادة
Jean-Noël Barrot of
السيدات
France,
والسادة
Highnesses, Excellencies,
يسرني في
ladies and
البداية
gentlemen.
أن نعرب
At
عن
the
بالغ
outset,
التقدير
please
والامتنان
allow me to extend
للمملكة
my
العربية السعودية
appreciation to the
والجمهورية
Kingdom of
الفرنسية
Saudi Arabia
على
and the
جهودهم
Republic of
المقدرة في
France
الإعداد
for
والتحضير
organizing
وتهيئة الأجواء لعقد هذا
this
المؤتمر
high-level
الدولي رفيع
international
المستوى
conference
للتسوية السلمية للقضية الفلسطينية وتنفيذ حل الدولتين انطلاقا من إيمانهما وحرصهما المشترك على دعم جهود إحلال السلام العادل والشامل في المنطقة وتعزيز الأمن والاستقرار الإقليمي والدولي. إن انعقاد هذا المؤتمر يعد خطوة مهمة ولحظة تاريخية نحو إعادة إحياء المسار السياسي والتنفيذ الفعلي لحل الدولتين وإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بما يكفل تحقيق تطلعات الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق في نيل حقوقه المشروعة غير القابلة للتصرف وإقامة دولة مستقلة ذات السيادة على حدود 4 من حزيران يونيو 1967 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية. تؤكد الجمهورية اليمنية على أهمية إطلاق عملية سياسية جادة وذات مصداقية وفق إطار زمني محدد وبرعاية دولية تؤدي إلى تنفيذ حل الدولتين وإنهاء الاحتلال بما يتماشى مع قرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبادرة السلام العربية بكامل عناصرها. وانطلاقا من الطبيعة العملية لهذا المؤتمر فإننا نتطلع إلى أن تسفر مداولاته عن نتائج ملموسة وواقعية تسهم في إحلال السلام وحل الدولتين وضمان الحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني من خلال تعزيز الاعتراف الدولي بدولة فلسطين. وفي هذا السياق نرحب بإعلان فرنسا عزمها الاعتراف بدولة فلسطين وندعو بقية الدول التي لم تعترف بعد بدولة فلسطين إلى اتخاذ خطوات مماثلة ونشكر من سبقها من الدول في اتخاذ هذا القرار ودعم دولة فلسطين إلى نيل العضوية الكاملة في الأمم المتحدة والوقف الفوري لجميع الإجراءات الأحادية بما في ذلك وقف سياسة الاستيطان غير القانونية التي تنتهجها إسرائيل القوى القائمة بالاحتلال في الضفة الغربية وعمليات الضم وهدم المنازل وتهجير السكان مما ينذر بتقليل فرص التوصل إلى تسوية سلمية للصراع وتحقيق السلام العادل والشامل وتقويض جهود حل الدولتين. كما ندعو إلى تقديم الدعم السياسي والمالي للحكومة الفلسطينية بما في ذلك الجهود توحيد المؤسسات الفلسطينية في الضفة الغربية وقطاع غزة تحت سلطة وطنية واحدة ودعم الخطة العربية الإسلامية للإنعاش المبكر وإعادة الإعمار والتنمية في غزة والتي قدمتها جمهورية مصر العربية بالتنسيق مع دولة فلسطين وقررت كل من الجامعة العربية ومنظمة التعاون الإسلامي ودعم وكالة الأنروا واستمرار عمليات ممارسة دورها الإنساني المهم الذي لا يمكن الاستغناء عنه بتقديم المساعدات للشعب الفلسطيني تجنب العواقب الإنسانية الكارثية. بلغ الوضع الإنساني في غزة مستويات كارثية غير مسبوقة مع انهيار كامل للبنية التحتية والنظام الصحي وانقطاع المياه والكهرباء وتدمير المدارس واستخدام التدوير كسلاح حرب يهدد حياة الملايين. إن الحصار المفروض يمثل عقابا جماعيا وانتهاكا صارخا للقانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني وعليه تدعو الجمهورية اليمنية إلى وقف فوري ودائم لإطلاق النار وضمان دخول المساعدات الإنسانية إلى قطاع غزة ورفع الحصار وتوفير الحماية للشعب الدولي للشعب الفلسطيني وإيقاف ما يجري في الضفة الغربية من عدوان إسرائيل المتواصل وارتكاب انتهاكات جسيمة بحق الفلسطينيين. وشكرا لكم.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires étrangères et des expatriés du Yémen. Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Abdul Latif bin Rashid Al-Zayani, ministre des Affaires étrangères de Bahreïn.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of God, most
صاحب
gracious,
السمو الأمير
most
فيصل بن
merciful,
فرحان،
His Highness Prince
معالي
Faisal bin
السيد
Farhan, His Excellency Mr. Jean-Noël Barrot, His Excellency Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished guests, may God's peace and blessings be
تقدم
upon you.
بخالص الشكر والامتنان
I extend my
للمملكة العربية
sincere
السعودية
thanks and
الشقيقة
gratitude to the sisterly
والجمهورية
kingdom of
الفرنسية
Saudi
الصديقة
Arabia and the friendly Republic
لجهودهما
of
في
France
تنظيم هذا
for their
المؤتمر
efforts
الدولي
in
الهام.
organizing this international
كما
conference.
نقدر دعم الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة للمبادرات التي تهيئ بيئة للسلام في الشرق الأوسط. ولا بد بداية من التأكيد بأن مملكة البحرين ظلت دائما مناصرة للسلم والأمن ودعت إلى بيئة مستقرة وآمنة تزدهر فيها جميع شعوب المنطقة بغض النظر عن اختلافاتهم الدينية أو الطائفية أو العرقية أو الأيديولوجية. وتؤمن بأن الإرث الذي نتركه للأجيال القادمة إرث متجذر في ضمان الأمن والاستقرار والازدهار، ويتوقف تحقيقه على قدرتنا الجماعية على مواجهة التحديات المستمرة، ولا سيما الصراع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي. فقد أعاقت هذه القضية المأساوية المزمنة السلام والاستقرار الإقليميين، وأثرت على العديد من الدول. وأننا في مملكة البحرين ندرك أن الحل العادل والدائم لا يمكن تحقيقه إلا من خلال المفاوضات المباشرة والحوار الدبلوماسي بين جميع الأطراف، وصولا إلى إقامة دولة فلسطينية مستقلة تتعايش بسلام مع إسرائيل. وتتطلع رؤيتنا إلى علاقات طبيعية بين الشعبين الإسرائيلي والفلسطيني وجميع دول المنطقة، وهو طموح قابل للتحقيق إذا صدقت النوايا وتمسك الجميع بهدف إحلال السلام والازدهار. ولتعزيز هذه الرؤية ندعو بإلحاح إلى الوقف الفوري لإطلاق النار في قطاع غزة، وإعطاء الأولوية للإغاثة الإنسانية والإفراج السريع عن الرهائن. إن الأزمة الإنسانية الحالية تؤكد مسؤوليتنا المشتركة في صون كرامة الإنسان وحقوقه الأساسية في الحياة والحرية والأمن لجميع شعوب المنطقة. لقد تردد صدى هذه الدعوة النبيلة خلال قمة البحرين في مايو 2024، حيث اجتمع قادة الدول العربية في مملكة البحرين برئاسة حضرة صاحب الجلالة الملك حمد بن عيسى الخليفة المعظم حفظه الله ورعاه. وعكست القمة التزام القادة الجماعي بحل سلمي للصراع الفلسطيني الإسرائيلي من خلال عقد مؤتمر دولي يسهل التفاوض بين جميع الأطراف المعنية. إن مملكة البحرين تدعوكم إلى تعزيز التعاون المشترك وتجاوز أي خلافات والتركيز على أهدافنا المشتركة في السلام والاستقرار والازدهار. فمعا يمكننا بناء مستقبل يحترم حقوق وتطلعات كل من الإسرائيليين والفلسطينيين، ويعزز روح التعاون والتعايش لكافة شعوب المنطقة وفي جميع أنحائها. شكرا لكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires étrangères de Bahreïn.
His Excellency the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Bahrain.
Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence Monsieur Abdelkader Hussein Omar, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale de Djibouti.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سمو الأمير فيصل فرحان آل سعود وزير خارجية المملكة العربية السعودية الشقيقة. Excellence Monsieur Jean-Noël Barrot, ministre de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères de la République française. Excellence Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, distingués délégués, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. À l'entame de mes propos, Permettez-moi, au nom de la
At the
République de
outset,
Djibouti,
on behalf of the
d'adresser nos
Republic of
vives
Djibouti,
félicitations
we would like
à
to
la
extend
République
our
française
heartfelt
et au Royaume
congratulations
d'Arabie
to the French
Saoudite
Republic and to the
pour
Kingdom of Saudi
l'organisation de cette
Arabia.
conférence
Congratulations for
internationale de
convening
haut
this
niveau dédiée à la
high-level
résolution
international conference
pacifique de la
for
question
the peaceful
palestinienne
settlement of the
et à la
question of
mise en œuvre
Palestine
effective
and
de la
the
solution
effective
à deux États.
implementation of the two-state
Nous
solution.
remercions également les
We'd also
coprésidents
like to
pour leur
thank the
engagement
co-chairs
et la
for their
préparation des trois
commitment
tables rondes
and
dont
for
nous espérons
preparing the
qu'elles
three round tables.
aboutiront
We
à des
hope
propositions
that
concrètes et orientées
the
vers
round
l'action.
tables will result in concrete
La
and
République de Djibouti reste
action-oriented
convaincue
proposals. The Republic
que
of
la
Djibouti stands
résolution
convinced
durable
that
du
the
conflit
lasting
israélo-palestinien
settlement of
repose
the
sur le
Israeli-Palestinian
respect
conflict
scrupuleux du droit
lies in
international
meticulous
par
respect
tous
for
les
international
acteurs
law
et en
by
premier
all
lieu
actors, first and
Israël.
foremost Israel.
أصحاب السمو والمعالي والسعادة سيد الرئيس الحضور الكريم إن
Your
جمهورية
Highness,
جيبوتي
Excellencies,
قيادة
co-chairs,
وشعبا ظلت
ladies and
ثابتة
gentlemen,
في
the
موقفها
Republic of
المبدئي
Djibouti, its leadership
من
and its
القضية
people
الفلسطينية العادلة
have stood
وداعمة
firm
بكل
on
وضوح
Palestine on a
لحل
just
الدولتين
solution.
كخيار
We've
وحيد
supported
قابل للحياة
the
ينهي
two-state
الاحتلال
solution
ويصون
very
الحقوق
clearly. That is the
ويحقق
only viable
الأمن
choice that can put an end to
لكافة
the
شعوب
occupation
المنطقة.
and uphold the rights
نؤكد هنا
as well as the
مجددا
security
بأن الأمن
of all people
لا
in the
يبنى
region.
على القهر
Here we would like to reiterate
والاستقرار
that
لا
security
يتحقق عبر
can
الحصار
only be built
والسلام لا يفرض بالقوة
cannot be
بل
built on
يصنع عبر
injustice.
العدالة
Stability
والمفاوضات
cannot be
الجادة
imposed by
والإرادة السياسية
sieges.
الدولية
You need
الصادقة.
justice to achieve
À
peace,
cet égard,
serious
nous ne pouvons
negotiations
garder le
and
silence
sincere
sur ce qui se
policies.
déroule
We
aujourd'hui
cannot
dans
remain
la bande de Gaza,
silent
qui est une
given what's
tragédie
happening
humaine
today in the Gaza Strip,
d'une
an
ampleur
inhuman
insoutenable,
tragedy of
une
unbearable
blessure profonde
proportions,
infligée à la
a
conscience
deep
universelle,
wound
un affront
in
aux
our
valeurs
universal
fondamentales sur
conscience,
lesquelles
an
repose
affront
notre ordre
to the fundamental
international.
values on which
La
our
souffrance à
international
laquelle nous
order
assistons a
rests. The
dépouillé
suffering
l'humanité
we've been
de sa
witnessing
substance et de
has
son sens
robbed
premier,
humanity of its
à savoir
very
refuser
meaning, of
et
its
s'opposer à
substance.
l'injustice.
That is
Elle remet en lumière
knowing how to
l'échec
stand up
dramatique de
and
notre conscience
reject
collective
injustice.
face à
This
l'innocence
throws into
fauchée,
sharp relief
à la souffrance
the
des
dramatic
familles,
failure
à la
of our
destruction
collective
ciblée des
conscience,
hôpitaux,
faced with
des
young lives
écoles
cut
et
short,
des
the suffering of
habitations. Le
families,
tout
the
maintenu
targeted
dans un
destruction of
blocus
hospitals, schools,
impitoyable,
and
utilisé
homes,
comme une arme de guerre
and
contre
this
des
during
civils
an
innocents.
unbearable blockade which
Ceci
has
est
claimed
moralement
innocent
inacceptable,
lives. This is morally unacceptable,
juridiquement injustifiable
legally
et humainement
unjustifiable,
intolérable.
and
Elle constitue une violation
intolerable
flagrante du droit
for humanity.
international humanitaire,
It's a flagrant
des
violation of
principes
international
fondamentaux de la
humanitarian law
dignité
and
humaine
the fundamental
et des
principles of
responsabilités que
human
nous
dignity,
partageons tous.
as well as of our
Il est
shared
plus que temps que la
responsibility.
communauté internationale agisse,
It is long
non
overdue
pas
for
par
the
calcul
international
ou par
community to
intérêt,
take action,
mais par
not to
devoir,
further its own
par fidélité
interests
aux
or out of
principes
some
de justice,
calculus, but out
de
of
paix et
duty,
de
out of
responsabilité que
loyalty
nous avons
for
tous
the principles of
solennellement
justice,
endossés.
peace, and the
Excellences, mesdames et
responsibility
messieurs,
we
la
solemnly
résolution durable du
shoulder.
conflit
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
israélo-arabe ne
the
saurait
lasting
faire l'économie d'un
settlement
retour
of
aux
the
fondements
Arab-Israeli conflict
posés par
cannot
l'initiative
forgo
de paix
a
arabe
return
de
to the
2002.
foundations laid down in the
Cette
Arab
initiative
Peace Initiative
soutenue par
adopted
l'ensemble
in
des États arabes
2002. This
offre
initiative,
un cadre
supported by all
équilibré et
Arab states,
constructif.
is a constructive
Elle demeure
and balanced
aujourd'hui une
framework.
référence
Today,
incontournable pour toute
it
solution
is
juste,
an unavoidable
globale
model
et conforme
for
au droit
any
international.
just and
À cet
comprehensive
égard, il
solution
importe
that is in keeping with
également de
international
rappeler
law.
l'importance
It's
de l'avis
also worth
consultatif
recalling
rendu
the
par la Cour de
importance of the
justice,
advisory opinion
par la Cour
issued by
internationale de
the
justice le
International Court
19
of
janvier,
Justice on the
le
19th
19
of
juillet
July
2024 et qui
2024.
constitue un jalon juridique
This is
majeur.
a legal
Par cet avis, la
milestone
Cour a clairement défini
of
les
great
principes
importance.
juridiques
Through the
impératifs
opinion,
encadrant
the
les
court
conséquences des
clearly
politiques menées par
determined
Israël
the imperative
dans
legal
les territoires
principles
palestiniens
framing
occupés
the consequences of the
y
policies
compris
imposed by
Jérusalem-Est.
Israel in
Cet
the
avis
occupied
renforce non
Palestinian
seulement la
territory,
légitimité des
including
droits
East
des peuples
Jerusalem.
palestiniens,
This
mais engage
opinion
également
reinforced
l'ensemble
not
de la
only the
communauté
legitimacy of the
internationale
rights of the
à en
Palestinian
tirer
people,
les
but also
conséquences.
committed the entire
Dans
international
cet esprit,
community
nous
to
appelons
take
tous les
stock
États
of
à
the
respecter
consequences
pleinement leurs
thereof.
obligations
In this
juridiques,
spirit, we call on
condition
states to fully
indispensable à
respect their
l'émergence
legal obligations
d'une
and
solution juste, durable et
indispensable
conforme au droit
precondition for the
international.
emergence of a
Nous
lasting
exhortons en particulier ceux qui ne l'ont pas encore fait à reconnaître sans délai l'État de Palestine, à l'instar des 148 pays qui l'ont déjà fait, conformément à leur devoir de soutenir les droits du peuple palestinien à l'autodétermination. J'ai saisi également cette opportunité pour renouveler les félicitations de son Excellence, le président de la République de Djibouti, son Excellence Ismaël Omar Guelleh, à son homologue le président Emmanuel Macron pour l'annonce de la reconnaissance officielle de l'État de Palestine lors de la prochaine session de l'Assemblée générale. Cette décision historique prise à un moment crucial pour le peuple palestinien renforce l'élan en faveur d'une paix durable.
up the momentum towards lasting peace. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on the diplomatic front, Djibouti calls on all states to resolutely commit to the objectives of this conference and to actively support the implementation of the two-state solution. This solution remains the only viable path to a peaceful settlement that would guarantee the existence of two sovereign and independent states living side by side within 1967 borders, living in peace and security. We must dare.
Nous pouvons répondre au désarroi du peuple palestinien en reconnaissant son existence légitime à vivre dans son propre territoire. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
On their own territory. I thank you.
Je remercie le ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale de Djibouti. Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence Madame Selinda Souza Lula, ministre des Affaires étrangères de l'État plurinational de Bolivie.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Quiero agradecer de manera muy especial
In particular, I would
a la
like to thank
copresidencia de
the
Francia,
co-chairs
de Arabia
from
Saudita,
France and Saudi
por
Arabia
haber propiciado
for
esta
having
convocatoria
made this
juntos
meeting
a
possible,
muchos representantes
together with
de
the
Estados
many
miembros
representatives
que
of
hoy
member
nos
states
hacemos presente
that
en esta
are
asamblea.
present here today in this assembly.
Saludar a mis hermanos cancilleres,
I would like to greet my fellow
embajadores
foreign ministers,
y a cada uno
ambassadors,
de los
and
delegados
each and every one
que se han
of
dado
the
cita
delegates that
hoy,
have come here today,
porque el valor más grande que nos
because the
convoca
greatest value
es el derecho a la
that
vida
brings us here
y a vivir en
is the right
paz
to life and the
en
right to
este
live in
mundo
peace
que compartimos.
in this world that we share.
Hermanos copresidentes, quiero hacer
My
presente
brothers, co-chairs,
un saludo de nuestro
I would
hermano
like to express the
presidente Luis
greetings
Arce
from our
Catacora
brother, President Luis
y sobre
Arce
todo del
Catacora,
pueblo
and
boliviano.
above all from the Bolivian
Hoy,
people.
a nombre
Today,
de este pueblo de
on
paz,
behalf of this people
hago
of peace,
un llamado urgente
I make an urgent
para que el
appeal
cese inmediato del juego
for
y del
an
del
immediate
genocidio
ceasefire and an
que
immediate
vive el
end to
hermano
the
pueblo
genocide
de
being
Palestina.
experienced by the brother people of Palestine.
Queremos reiterar nuestra firme
We would like to
convicción
reiterate
sobre la
our
solución de dos
firm
estados
stance on the
que
two-state solution.
consideramos la vía más
We
justa
consider it to
y
be the
duradera
most just and
hacia una
lasting
paz
path towards
de nuestros pueblos hermanos.
peace for these brotherly peoples.
Esta visión se fundamenta
This
en las
vision
resoluciones
is based
de las Naciones
on the
Unidas
resolutions of the United
y en ese
Nations,
sentido
and
común
in that
de la
regard,
justicia que se debe aplicar,
it is based on the common
aplicarse
sense of justice
cuanto antes
that
sea
should be
posible
applied as
para
soon as
acabar
possible,
con tanto sufrimiento
so as to put an
innecesario
end
de
to
nuestro
so
hermano
much
pueblo
unnecessary
de Palestina.
suffering by the brotherly
Sin embargo,
people
Israel
of Palestine.
hace oídos
However,
sordos
Israel
del clamor
is turning a
internacional
deaf ear to
y
the
continúa
international outrage and
expandiéndose
continues
los
to
asentamientos
expand
en
its
territorios
settlements
palestinos
on Palestinian
ocupados.
occupied territories.
Continúa demoliendo
It
hogares,
continues to demolish
centros de salud,
homes, health
centros
centers,
de educación y
schools,
sobre todo desplazando
and
a
above all,
familias
continues to
enteras,
displace entire
bloqueando
families,
los alimentos, el agua,
blocking
el pan,
access to
de
food,
toda la ayuda humanitaria
water, bread,
que
all
se
sorts of
hacen grandes
humanitarian
esfuerzos para que
assistance.
lleguen, pero por este bloqueo
Great efforts are
no es
being made
posible.
to bring that humanitarian
Ejercer
assistance in, but
violencia
because of the blockade, it is not
contra
arriving.
civiles
It is
causa
engaging
cada
in
día más
violence
dolor
against
y
civilians that is
llanto
causing more and
en
more
Gaza.
pain and grief every day
Esta
in Gaza.
impunidad no debe
This
continuar.
impunity must not continue.
Estas acciones vulneran el derecho
These actions are a
internacional,
violation
en
of
particular
international law,
la Convención de Ginebra.
particularly of the Geneva Convention.
Hermanos copresidentes,
My brothers,
en
co-chairs,
los últimos días la situación
in the past few
es
days,
mucho más preocupante.
the situation has grown
Vemos con
much more
indignación
worrying.
cómo Israel
We see with
está
outrage how Israel
utilizando hoy
is using
el hambre
hunger
como una
now
arma de guerra.
as a weapon of war,
Hambre contra los niños,
inflicting hunger on
contra
children
las mujeres y
women,
contra los ancianos.
and older persons.
Yo como madre cuánto dolor
as a
en mi
mother,
corazón de ver a un niño,
how much
de
pain do I
a un
feel
bebé
in my heart
que
to see a
muere
child, to see
hoy
a baby
por no tener leche,
dying
por no
today
tener agua, tal
due
vez
to a lack of
tampoco lo
milk, due to a
tenga
lack of water.
su madre en sus brazos. Y esto no podemos
And
cerrar los ojos
that
y
is
decir
something that
aquí
we
no
cannot
está pasando.
turn a blind eye to and simply say here that nothing's happening.
Gaza se ha convertido en
Gaza
una tierra de
has
cadáveres
become
ambulantes.
a
Cientos de
land of
civiles
walking
han sido
corpses.
asesinados en el
Hundreds of people
camino
have been
cuando
killed
iban en busca de comida
while they were on
y en
their way
busca
to
de
find
agua.
food and water.
Yo pregunto, en esta asamblea,
I would like to ask in this
¿desde cuándo
assembly,
los civiles, los niños,
civilians,
las personas de la
children,
tercera edad,
older
la
persons,
prensa y los mismos
the press,
funcionarios de las Naciones
and
Unidas
United Nations
se han
officials
convertido
themselves,
en un blanco
when
de
did
guerra?
they all become targets in war?
¿Cuánto hemos hecho como humanos para impedir
How much have we done
esta
as human
catástrofe,
beings
lo que
to
está sucediendo
stop this
en
catastrophe
Palestina?
that is playing out in Palestine?
Lo que está ocurriendo en Gaza
What is happening in
es una
Gaza
catástrofe humanitaria
is a humanitarian catastrophe,
que se debe detener
and it
inmediatamente.
must be stopped immediately.
Yo aplaudo en esta oportunidad
I take this opportunity
a que más de 130 países
to applaud the fact that
Hoy nos
more than
reunimos aquí
130 countries are here today,
para que esta voz
so
sea
that this
escuchada,
voice can
para
be
que esta voz
heard,
sea
so that this
elevada
voice can
y
be
de
raised
verdad
up, and
que esto
so
no sea un
that
encuentro
this
más
does
de la,
not just
de la
become
Asamblea de las
yet
Naciones
another
Unidas,
meeting of the United Nations
sino que
General
sea un
Assembly,
encuentro
but
con
rather
resultados,
to make sure that it
para
is a
que el día de
meeting with
mañana
results,
no
so
sigamos
that
escuchando
tomorrow we
que
don't
siguen muriendo
continue
niños
to hear
de hambre,
about children dying of
hombres y
hunger,
mujeres de hambre.
women and men dying of hunger.
¿Quiénes están financiando la guerra?
Those that are
Son
financing
cómplices
this
y
war
culpables
are complicit
de estos
and
crímenes
guilty in
que
these
está
crimes
sucediendo en
that are
Palestina.
taking place
Y
in
esto
Palestine.
debe ser sancionado.
And that must be punished.
Tenemos que realmente dejar precedentes para que nunca
We have
más
to really
vuelva a
establish
suceder
precedents
en ninguno de los
so that
países
this is
y
never
no
repeated
tengamos que
again in
cargar
any other
con
country,
esta
and so that we
historia
do not
en nuestras
have to
espaldas.
bear this on our
Por esa
shoulders once
razón
again.
proponemos
And for
dos
that reason,
medidas.
we propose two
En primer
measures.
lugar,
First of all,
que todos los países
we propose that
presentes
all
nos
countries here
pronunciemos
present
sobre la situación de la
speak
hambruna
out
y exijamos
about the
que se
situation
declare
of hunger
formalmente por
and
la ONU
that we decide that the UN
para que
formally
se tomen
declare
medidas
the need for
pertinentes
measures to be taken,
y realmente
relevant measures,
parar esta situación
to
de hambruna
truly
que hoy está
stop
utilizando
this
como arma de
situation
guerra
of starvation
Israel.
that is being used
En
currently as a
segundo
weapon of
lugar,
war by
que la
Israel.
Corte
And
Internacional de
secondly,
Justicia
for the International Court
sancione
of
a
Justice
Israel
to
por el
sanction
crimen
Israel
de someter a
for
la
the crime
hambruna
of
a nuestros hermanos
subjecting
de Palestina.
our brothers and sisters from Palestine to
copresidentes,
hunger, to starvation.
Esta situación
Co-chairs.
demanda de
This
decisiones
situation
contundentes
requires
y
firm
no
decisions to be taken.
debemos centrarnos únicamente en medidas
We should not
paliativas.
just focus
El
on
genocidio
palliative
debe
measures.
parar y las
The
soluciones
genocide
de
has to
dos
be stopped
estados
and the
deben
two-state solution
aplicarse.
has to be implemented.
Debemos asegurar su cumplimiento
We have to
de las
ensure
resoluciones
the
que se
fulfillment
emitan
and the implementation
en
of
este
the
gran
resolutions
encuentro
that
de la
are
Asamblea de la
issued
ONU.
at this UN General Assembly
Desde
meeting.
Bolivia alentamos a los estados
Bolivia urges
a que
countries
asumamos un rol más activo
to take on a more
en la
active role
defensa de los derechos
in the
del
defense
pueblo
of the
palestino,
rights of the
a
Palestinian
promover
people,
el multilateralismo
and to promote
efectivo
effective
y a buscar una
multilateralism,
paz que no humille a
and
nadie
pursue a peace that does not
y que
humiliate anyone
seamos y que se reconozca a todos.
and that
Por eso
recognizes
yo quiero
everyone.
felicitar al hermano pueblo de
And for that reason, I would like to
por el
congratulate the brotherly people of France for recognizing the state of Palestine. And that should serve as an example for many states, for us to recognize the existence of Palestine as a sovereign and free country.
Porque no puede haber seguridad sin justicia.
Because there can be no security without justice. There can be no peace without dignity.
No puede haber soluciones
and there can be no solutions without mutual recognition and without recognizing the right of the other to exist.
Reiteramos con firmeza
we reiterate firmly to the brotherly people of Palestine that people has the right to self-determination, the right to live in liberty and in peace, without occupation and without fear, without the fear of being attacked, tortured, and the threat of death. Dialogue, respect, and legality should be the pillars, the fundamental pillars of the people of Palestine.
A mí me causa mucho dolor cuando realmente tengo que hablar del hermano del pueblo de Palestina.
It causes me a great deal of pain when I have to speak about the people of Palestine. Those of us that are far away only see the stories in the news, but what is really being experienced by the brotherly people of Palestine is much more serious. But with firmness and the support of many countries, such as Germany, which is putting together an air bridge to ensure the arrival of food, that already constitutes recognition. And I would like to congratulate and thank many countries, really. Bolivia is a small country, but we have been firm from the outset, and we have made many efforts to ensure that humanitarian assistance reach Palestine. I would like you to help me in saying, long live free Palestine.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Je remercie la ministre des Affaires étrangères de l'État plurinational de Bolivie. Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Mbaye Mohamed, ministre des Affaires étrangères et de la coopération internationale, responsable du monde arabe, de la diaspora, de la francophonie et de l'intégration africaine des Comoros.
Monsieur le coprésident, Monsieur le secrétaire général, Monsieur le président de l'Assemblée générale, honorable assistance en voix et qualité, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. En 2015, en ce même haut lieu symbolique de la diplomatie, du vivant ensemble et du droit international, les objectifs mondiaux ont été adoptés en vue d'éradiquer la pauvreté, protéger la planète et faire en sorte que tous les êtres humains vivent dans la paix et la prospérité d'ici 2030. 10 ans plus tard, alors que nous nous approchons de cet horizon 2030, que nous sommes fixés celui d'offrir à l'humanité le droit de vivre dans la paix,
prosperity without any distinction based on race or religion. At this time, the Palestinian people is confronted with a choice between death by bombs or death by hunger. Every day, men, women, and children are dying, while we cannot take action to stop this genocide unfolding before our very eyes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today, even the deaf hear the cries of Palestinian children. The blind can see the bloodbath, the deprivation and desolation of the Palestinian people. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting comes at a crucial point for peace and security in the Middle East. It reflects the renewed will of the international community to revive the peace process on just, equitable, and lasting foundations in keeping with international law and relevant United Nations resolution. Right now, the world has its eyes upon us at a time when international law, essential, a guarantor of global peace and security, is being trampled like never before. It's as if our world had become a wilderness where might makes right, a world which seems to have lost its soul, the soul of our humanity, a world which is lost. So today, when all hope is permissible, will we be able to meet the legitimate expectations of this people, which calls for its right to life, simply to life, to dignity and to hope, a people the suffering of which is the mirror of our collective failure to guarantee peace and justice. The solution proposed by the United Nations, that is, a Palestinian state living peacefully side by side with Israel, is the only way forward.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, Mon pays, l'Union des Comores, fidèle à ses principes de respect du droit international, réaffirme ici son soutien indéfectible à cette solution à deux États, avec Jérusalem-Est comme capitale de l'État de Palestine. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'Union des Comores salue l'initiative de cette conférence internationale, co-présidée par l'Arabie Saoudite et la France, sous l'égide de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, qui se tient à quelques semaines de la 80e session de l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. Au rythme du massacre perpétré contre le peuple palestinien, d'ici la prochaine Assemblée générale, nous risquons d'avoir la mauvaise conscience de n'avoir pas agi pour sauver des milliers et des milliers de vies innocentes. À cet égard, nous avons le devoir de sortir de cette conférence avec l'intime conviction d'avoir inscrit résolument l'avenir d'un État palestinien au premier rang de notre agenda international. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, depuis plusieurs décennies, des voix se lèvent pour dénoncer cette injustice subie par le peuple palestinien. Après plusieurs décennies de souffrance endurées par le peuple palestinien, voici venue l'heure de vérité et d'action. Cette conférence sera-t-elle celle qui consacrera le droit à la vie et à la justice pour le peuple palestinien, ou sera-t-elle celle des discours sans effet ni perspective immédiate? Mesdames et Messieurs, quelle que soit la réponse à ces interrogations, une chose est sûre certaine, l'histoire nous jugera un jour ou l'autre.
History will judge us.
أشكر معالي وزير الخارجية والتعاون الدولي المسؤول عن العالم العربي والشتات والفرنكوفونية والتكامل الأفريقي.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation.
الكلمة للمتحدث القادم يسرني بالنيابة عن المملكة العربية السعودية
وجمهورية فرنسا والدول الرئيسية المشاركة في الخطة العامة الموثقة Saudi Arabia, France,
من المؤتمر الدولي بشأن التسوية السلمية لقضية فلسطين وتنفيذ حل الدولتين.
And the chairs of the working groups of the conference, Brazil, Canada, Egypt, Indonesia, Ireland, Italy, Japan, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Mexico, the Kingdom of Norway, Qatar, Spain, Turkey, the United Kingdom, the European Union, the League of Arab States,
وذلك وفقا لما نص عليه
on behalf of all these to adopt the outcome document and its annexes as per Resolution 79/81 adopted on the 3rd of December last year. The outcomes are in fact proposals across the humanitarian, legal, security, and narratives pillar so as to implement the two-state solution and guarantee peace and security for all. We call on you to support this document before the end of the 79th session of the General Assembly by contacting the missions of Saudi Arabia and France in New York.
والآن أعطي الكلمة إلى سعادة توسكاسا أويومورا الممثل الخاص لحكومة اليابان والوعود الخاص لحكومة اليابان للسلام في الشرق.
His Excellency Tsukasa Uemura, Special Representative of the Government of Japan, Special Envoy of the Government of Japan for the Middle East Peace.
Thank you, co-chairs. We extend our sincere gratitude to France and Saudi Arabia for their leadership in convening this high-level conference. In collaboration with Norway, our trusted partner and co-chair of the Working Group 4, we have engaged in vital discussions on practical measures to enhance the economic viability of the Palestinian state as part of our collective efforts toward a two-state solution. Co-chairs, Excellencies, the people of Gaza are enduring a grave humanitarian crisis marked by hunger and malnutrition. The conflict, now spanning a total of 21 months, have caused significant loss of lives, including innocent civilians and aid workers, such as staff from UNRWA. This is a profound tragedy. Humanitarian aid must never be contingent on political or military considerations. It is imperative that the United Nations and humanitarian agencies can operate independently and impartially. In this regard, we reaffirm that UNRWA continues to play an indispensable role in supporting Palestine refugees across the region. Co-chairs and excellencies, Japan reiterates our urgent call for Hamas to immediately and unconditionally release all remaining hostages. In the meantime, Japan firmly opposes any action that undermines the realization of a two-state solution, including the potential reoccupation of Gaza and the expansion of settlement activities in the West Bank. It is critical that all parties seize the momentum generated by this conference, renounce military solutions, and work earnestly towards the resumption of the Gaza ceasefire and the broader peace process. أصحاب السمو والسعادة زملائي الأعزاء، تعترف اليابان تماما بالطموحات المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني في إقامة دولة مستقلة، وتظل ثابتة في دعم جهوده بكل وسائل المتاحة. في هذا السياق تعبت اليابان على دعم حل الدولتين، وسوت خلال أولوياتها في مجلس الأمن في السنة الماضية لصالح القرار الدائم لحرق فلسطين الانضمام إلى أولوية الأمم المتحدة.
From Palestine to become a fully fledged member of the United Nations.
في الاعتبار بنتائج هذا المؤتمر الرفيع المستوى،
When considering the outcomes of this high-level conference,
سنواصل إجراء
based on the principles of strengthening peace,
لمسألة الاعتراف
we shall continue our comprehensive evaluation of the question of the recognition of the Palestinian state,
Thank you very much.
Notably the right time to do so. Thank you.
Je remercie le représentant spécial du gouvernement japonais, envoyé spécial du gouvernement japonais pour le processus de paix au Moyen-Orient, et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Jun Tsai, envoyé spécial du gouvernement chinois sur la question du Moyen-Orient.
Special Envoy of the Chinese government on the Middle East issue.
Co-chairs,
各位同事，
colleagues,
首先，
first,
我代表中方
on behalf of
感谢
China,
法国、
I thank
沙特
France, Saudi
和联合
Arabia,
国
and the UN
为筹备此次会议
for
所做的努力。
preparing for the conference.
去年12月，
In December last
联合国
year,
大会通过了决
a
议，
resolution was adopted
要
at the
求
General
以
Assembly
和平解
asking
决
to
巴勒
hold a
斯坦问
conference
题
with a theme of
及落
peaceful
实两国
settlement
方案
of the
为主
question of
题
Palestine
举
and the
行会议。
implementation of the two-state
今天
solution. Today,
大家
we're
齐聚
gathering
联合
here
国
at the UN
共商实现巴以全
for
面、
comprehensive,
公正与
just,
持久和
and
平，
lasting peace between
发出
Palestine
呼吁
and Israel
两国方
to
案政治
send
解
the
决
strongest
最
voice
强硬。
ever calling for political settlement
然而
of the two-state solution.
就在此时此
But
刻，
at this very moment,
加沙战火仍在
the
肆
war
虐，
flames are still
无
raging
辜的
in
生命
Gaza.
仍在消
Innocent
失，
lives are still being lost,
前所未有的人道危
and
机仍在
unprecedented
上演。
humanitarian crisis persists,
落实两国方案的基础持续遭到侵蚀。
the very foundation for
当
implementing
前
the
紧
two-state
迫形势
solution.
下，
Under the current
国际社会
urgent circumstances,
既要
the international
坐而论道，
community must not
更
only
要
sit down for
起而行
solution,
止， 为落实两国方案采取实际行动。为此，中方建议：第一，必须以最大的紧迫感推动全面停火，缓解人道危机。加沙冲突已经延宕了600余天，加沙早已沦为废墟瓦砾。枪林弹雨之下，平民生命安全无法保障，政治解决更无从谈起。安理会的权威必须得到维护。中方敦促有关各方切实执行安理会和联大有关决议，立即实现加沙停火止战，尽快释放人质和被扣押人员，要求以色列履行国际人道法义务，立即全面恢复加沙人道物资准入，支持联合国和国际组织为加沙人道援助发挥主导作用，呼吁联合国安理会采取一切必要行动，尽快结束这场21世纪以来最大的人道灾难，为落实两国方案创造现实条件。第二，必须秉持8人制8原则，推进加沙和西岸治理。加沙和约旦河西岸都是巴勒斯坦不可分割的领土。任何强制改变加沙地位、蚕食西岸土地的行径，都不会带来和平，只会引发新的动荡，破坏两国方案的前景。中方坚决反对一切违反国际法、企图掏空两国方案的言行，反对修建定基点，支持阿拉伯国家紧急峰会和伊斯兰合作组织紧急部长会合可的加沙重建计划，支持巴勒斯坦民族权利机构对加沙和约旦河西岸在内的所有巴勒斯坦领土进行有效管辖，愿为加沙重建做出力所能及的贡献。第三，必须支持巴勒斯坦加强内部团结，协助巴方提升治理能力和经济韧性。巴勒斯坦各派求同存异，团结一致。是巴勒斯坦独立建国的政治前提。中方长期致力于推动巴勒斯坦加强民族团结统一，支持巴勒斯坦民族权利机构增强权威、提升治理能力和有效履职，并在去年7月邀请各派在北京举行和解对话，并签署了北京宣言。发展经济、改善民生是巴勒斯坦国家可持续发展的物质基础。我们一直通过双多边渠道向巴方提供各类援助和培训，愿从国际社会一道继续向巴方提供人道主义和发展帮助。第四，必须维护落实两国方案的和平势能。本轮巴以冲突是巴勒斯坦问题长期遭边缘化的恶果，也再次唤醒全世界对这一问题的关注。国际社会同情巴勒斯坦，支持两国方案的声音和力量空前高涨。各方应以此为契机，以更大决心凝聚更大合力，让两国方案的由口号转化为行动。中方坚定支持建立以1967年边界为基础，以东耶路撒冷为首都，享有完全主权的独立的巴勒斯坦国。呼吁联合国尽快接纳巴勒斯坦成为正式会员国，要求有关国家不要为此设置障碍。呼吁尚未承认巴勒斯坦的国家尽快做出承认。第五，必须坚持共同综合合作可持续的安全观，实现中东长治久安。 security for achieving lasting peace and stability in the Middle East. The question of Palestine is the core of the Middle East issue, while situation in the Middle East also impacts the prospect for resolving the question of Palestine. China maintains that Palestine, Israel, and all the other regional countries rely on each other to enjoy security. Unilateral security approaches are untenable. Only common security can guarantee lasting peace by eliminating the breeding grounds for violence and hatred. Israel's legitimate security concerns should be respected, and Palestine's rights to existence, statehood, and development must also be realized. China sincerely hopes to see the peaceful coexistence of regional states at an early date, which will lead to peace, stability, and shared prosperity of the region. China stands ready to work with the international community to play a constructive role in de-escalating the regional tension. Colleagues, for however long the road is, we shall reach the end by walking. However difficult the task is, we shall accomplish it by doing. The two-state solution is the only feasible path to resolving the question of Palestine, and it represents the broadest international consensus. China hopes that this conference will inject new momentum into the realization of the two-state solution with a clear timeline and roadmap. China will keep working with the international community to achieve ceasefire in Gaza, and on this basis promote an early, comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the question of Palestine. Thank you.
Je remercie l'envoyé spécial du gouvernement chinois sur la question du Moyen-Orient. Je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence, M. Armanata Nazir, vice-ministre des Affaires étrangères de l'Indonésie.
Co-chairs, Excellencies, let me begin by thanking the government of France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for convening this vital conference on implementing the two-state solution. We are here today to stand for humanity, to demand justice for the Palestinian people, to push for a lasting solution to the most protracted conflict in the United Nations history. For over 7 decades, Palestinians have been denied the rights to independence. Today, they are being denied not only for freedom, but the right to live as human beings, the right to exist. Every day, the toll of human suffering rises. Civilians perish while queuing for food. The very fabric of Palestinian society is being torn apart. When food aid becomes a death sentence, how much worse must it get before we act? We have all spoken loudly. We have condemned. But now we must ask, how much longer will we allow this to continue? How much more life must be lost before the multilateral system fulfill its purpose to uphold peace and justice? Excellencies, Indonesia is proud to co-chair the Roundtable on Security with Italy. We bring the voice of solidarity, of principles, and of actions. This conference must be more than just another UN gathering. It must be a rallying point for global conscience. The future must not be a one-state reality built on annexation and apartheid. It must be a two-state solution where Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security within recognized borders based on the 1967 line, in accordance with international law, UN resolutions, and international agreements. We therefore welcome the joint statement and leadership of nearly 30 countries calling for an end to the war and humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We also welcome other global initiatives supporting the state of Palestine. These efforts must be the spark, not the ceiling, of our ambitions. Against this backdrop, let me highlight 3 essential points. First, recognition is not symbolic, it's strategic. Recognizing Palestine is not a favor, it is a duty under international law. To recognize Palestine is to stand for justice. It is to believe in the UN Charter. It is to level the diplomatic playing field. A two-state solution begins with political recognition. Only then can genuine peace negotiation take place. Only then can we end the illegal occupation as confirmed by the International Court of Justice. Second, hostilities must end. A ceasefire is not a tactic, it is a moral imperative. Humanitarian aid must flow. Civilians must be protected for both Palestinians and Israelis. President Prabowo has affirmed Indonesia's readiness to contribute to peace, including through providing personnel to support stabilization force efforts in Gaza under a UN mandate. We are not just advocating for peace, we are ready to help build it on the ground. Third, the future of Palestine must be Palestinian-led. Rebuilding Gaza and shaping its political future must be owned by the Palestinian people. No one can build a state of Palestine, only Palestinians can. Any attempt to forcibly displace them or impose conditions on their sovereignty must be firmly rejected. A strong, unified state of Palestine with full control over its territory, institution, and foundation is the foundation for sustainable peace. Only then can Israel truly be welcomed as a peaceful neighbor in a secure Middle East. Despite the devastation, Indonesia continues to invest in the Palestinian youth, particularly through education, because we believe one day these young people will lead a free, democratic, and sovereign Palestine. Excellencies, the time has come for decisive, irreversible steps to realize the two-state solutions. Indonesia stands ready to work with all countries to this end. I thank you.
Je remercie le vice-ministre des Affaires étrangères de l'Indonésie et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. David Lammy, secrétaire d'État aux Affaires étrangères, au Commonwealth et au développement du Royaume-Uni.
Well, thank you, Chair. We gather today at a dark moment. 660 days since the Israeli hostages were first cruelly taken by Hamas terrorists. There is no possible justification for this suffering and only a clear duty that we help to bring it to an end. The devastation in Gaza is heartbreaking. Children are starving, and Israel's drip feeding of aid has horrified the world. These are an affront to the values of the Charter of the United Nations. Last week, Britain led 28 countries in demanding an immediate end to this terrible war, and we set the region on a path to a better future. That requires not just an immediate ceasefire, but a plan to make it last. Colleagues, our history means that Britain bears a special burden of responsibility to support the two-state solution. In the last 12 months, the United Kingdom government has repeatedly taken action in the face of the current crisis. We restored funding to UNRWA. We suspended arms exports that could be used in Gaza. We provided tens of millions of pounds in humanitarian assistance. We signed a landmark agreement with the Palestinian Authority, and we stood up for the independence of the international courts. We have delivered 3 sanctions packages on violent settlers, and we suspended trade negotiations with the Israeli government, and we sanctioned far-right Israeli ministers for incitement. Yet, dear friends, the situation on the ground continues to worsen, and the two-state solution is in peril. And so to reach that better future, we must first reflect on the past. 108 years ago, my predecessor as British Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour, signed the declaration that bears his name. It helped lay the foundations for a homeland for the Jewish people, and Britain can be proud of that. Our support for Israel, its right to exist, and the security of its people is steadfast. However, the Balfour Declaration came with the solemn promise that nothing shall be done, nothing which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of the Palestinian people as well. And colleagues, this has not been upheld, and it is a historical injustice which continues to unfold. As diplomats and politicians, we have become accustomed to uttering the words, a two-state solution. Countless times, this Assembly and the Security Council has proclaimed that there must be a two-state resolution. Resolution after resolution. Resolution 181, Resolution 242, Resolution 446, Resolution 1515, Resolution 2334. These cannot be just numbers on a page, but the conviction of a deeply frustrated world. Chairs, Hamas must never be rewarded for the monstrous attack on October the 7th. It must immediately release the hostages, agree to an immediate ceasefire, accept it will have no role in governing Gaza, and commit to disarmament. But Hamas are not the Palestinian people, and there is no contradiction between support for Israel's security and support for Palestinian statehood. Indeed, the opposite is true. Let me be clear. The Netanyahu government's rejection of a two-state solution is wrong. It's wrong morally and it's wrong strategically. It harms the interests of the Israeli people, closing off the only path to a just and lasting peace. And that is why we are determined to protect the viability of a two-state solution. And so it is with the hand of history on our shoulders that His Majesty's government therefore intends to recognize the state of Palestine when the UN General Assembly gathers in September here in New York. friends, we will do this unless the Israeli government acts to end the appalling situation in Gaza, ends its military campaign, and commits to a long, sustainable peace based on a two-state solution. Our demands on Hamas also remain absolute and unwavering. Before the UN General Assembly gathers, we will take stock of how far the parties have come in meeting these steps. No one side will have a veto on recognition through their actions or inactions. But recognition by itself will not change the situation on the ground. That is why we are taking immediate steps as well, like airdropping humanitarian supplies along with our partners in Jordan, getting injured children into British hospitals, and pressing for the resumption of the United Nations humanitarian assistance. We also believe that a lasting ceasefire requires urgent progress on governance and security in Gaza. We are therefore working with allies on a plan for long-term political negotiations and a two-state solution. Chair, there is no better vision for the future of the region than two states. Israelis living within secure borders, recognized and at peace with their neighbors, free from the threat of terrorism, and Palestinians living in their own state in dignity and security, free of occupation. The decades-long conflict between Israelis and Palestinians cannot be managed or contained. It must now be resolved. Britain is ready to play its full and historic part. Thank you very much.
Je remercie très sincèrement le secrétaire d'État aux Affaires étrangères, au Commonwealth et au développement du Royaume-Uni. Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Nou Yilmaz, vice-ministre des Affaires étrangères de la Turquie.
Esteemed ministers, excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation to the co-chairs, France and Saudi Arabia, for taking the lead to revitalize the efforts for the implementation of the two-state solution. I also express our thanks to our fellow co-chair, Ireland, in the working group on preserving the two-state solution for its close cooperation. The two-state solution remains central to not only the peaceful settlement of the conflict, but also to preserving sustainable peace and security in the broader region. We should remember the reason why the two-state solution is not achieved so far: occupation. Therefore, any realistic solution has to face with this cruel nature of the occupation. In other words, the root cause of the problem, i.e., the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory, should be addressed for any viable solution. Again, let me remind you that the reason why this conference was delayed was Israel's attacks on Iran. This is a testament to the urgency of ending Israel's aggression, expansionism, and policy of strategic destabilization in the region. Israel has strategically been exporting instability to the whole region by seeking for endless wars with hegemonic intentions. No central authority is spared, weakened state structures are sought, failed states are desired and even engineered. That begins and ends with the establishment of a sovereign Palestinian state, based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Horrendous images of innocent civilians, children, babies dying from hunger, or shootings in Gaza shake all of us. The images that come out of Gaza in the 21st century will haunt humanity for the years to come. The genocide committed by Israel in Gaza is a dark stain on the international order. There are signs that the international order is being adversely affected by the continuation of this genocide. The rules-based international system is being called into question. An immediate and permanent ceasefire is the most urgent priority. Under the current circumstances, a ceasefire is not possible if the aggressor is not forced to do so. As the international community, we have the obligation to put an end to this man-made human catastrophe. For that, we have to collectively put together more pressure on Israel. For this, the recognition of the State of Palestine is the most imminent step to take by all those who have not yet done so. Within this framework, we welcome all recent moves for recognition. Aside from these urgent political steps, we should also help the Palestinian Authority in capacity building in all possible ways. In parallel to that, reconstruction efforts must be started without delay. The Arab Reconstruction Plan is the only viable plan for the reconstruction of Gaza. Turkey stands ready to contribute actively to these efforts. We stand at a critical moment. Yes, Palestine needs economic support, capacity building, empowering, trade, and any kind of material and moral support. Yet, we must all understand that this is not enough. Palestine needs more. Palestine needs strong and concrete political solidarity that should go hand in hand with coercive measures such as a UN ban on transfers of arms, as well as halting trade with the aggressor. Israel continues to enable illegal settlements. It even goes beyond with its government chanting openly and loudly for the annexation of Palestinian territories. Settlerism is theft, settlerism is crime, settlerism is an anachronistic version of colonialism in the 21st century. Settler terrorism should not go unpunished. Settlers and their enablers must face consequences. Last but not least, the implementation of the two-state solution requires solid institutions and the protection of Palestinian people. Thus, supporting the Palestinian Authority and preventing Israeli actions aiming to uproot the Palestinian nation from their homeland are crucial for any credible roadmap for Palestinian statehood. Excellencies, with regard to the draft outcome document of our conference, particularly its paragraph 11, Turkey is of the opinion that, based on the decades-long Israeli record, the handover of weapons by the Palestinian armed groups should be closely conditioned to the realization of an independent, sovereign, and contiguous Palestinian state on the 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, or an agreement reached among the Palestinian groups as part of the reconciliation process. But we did not break the silence, once again, to preserve the unity of the international community. We hope that our concern will be taken into consideration by the member states in their relationships and in the future processes. Turkey will continue its unwavering support for law, justice, and hence the rights of the Palestinian people who are in desperate need of our active and concrete support. Thank you.
أشكر معالي نائب وزير خارجية تركيا. والآن أعطي الكلمة إلى معالي السيد إيمير هيجنز وزير الدولة في وزارة النفقات العامة والبنية التحتية وإصلاح الخدمات العامة والرقمنة في إيرلندا.
Minister of Ireland. Thank you very much. And I would like to begin by thanking our co-chairs, France and Saudi Arabia, for bringing us together today for this important and historic day. On behalf of Ireland, I reaffirm our unequivocal support for advancing the two-state solution. I endorse the conference outcome document, and I encourage other UN members to do the same. I welcome the announcement by France that it will recognise the State of Palestine, and I acknowledge the statement we've just heard from the United Kingdom. As we meet here today, Palestinians in Gaza are enduring unconscionable suffering. The humanitarian situation has reached catastrophic levels. Mass starvation is spreading across the Gaza Strip. Babies are dying because of a man-made famine. Violence, thirst, starvation are killing people every day. We are seeing the destruction of homes, of hospitals, of lives. The July IPC hunger classification, which was published today, tells us the worst-case scenario of famine is now unfolding in Gaza. The humanitarian system in Palestine is crumbling right when it is needed the most. Israeli hostages remain in captivity with immense suffering for them and their families. And let me reiterate Ireland's unequivocal condemnation of the heinous terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel on the 7th of October. We urgently need to see a ceasefire, and we urgently need to see the release of all hostages. I thank Egypt, Qatar, and the United States for their efforts in securing progress as mediators. There must be an influx of life-saving aid to the people of Gaza. Humanitarian pauses and corridors are long overdue, and they are the bare minimum of what is required. Israel must let aid enter Gaza in sufficient quantities and let the UN and humanitarian organisations do their life-saving work. But instead, people are being killed trying to access aid. Children are starving before our eyes. Aid workers have been killed. This appalling situation shames us all. It is an affront to our common humanity, and it is an affront to the charter of this very organisation. For decades, we have known the only path to a just and a lasting solution to the Israeli-Palestine conflict is the two-state solution. Two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and in security. But for decades, we've seen collective failure to take collective and meaningful action. Today, to those suffering in Gaza and in the West Bank, the two-state solution must seem out of reach. But it cannot be. It cannot be about the long term. It has to be about the here and now. It has to be about today. And the two-state solution is key to achieving the most urgent goal, securing an immediate and sustainable ceasefire and the release of all hostages. The two-state solution is indispensable because it would deliver long-term peace, stability and security for the region as a whole. It is recognised clearly in the UN Security Council Resolution 2735, which rejects any attempt at demographic or territorial change in the Gaza Strip, including any actions that reduce the territory of Gaza. And it also reaffirms the importance of unifying the Gaza Strip with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. And yet, these principles are flouted with total impunity. We cannot stand by. We must demonstrate more clearly that we afford equal value to the security of Israelis and Palestinians. We, the international community, must act. We do not underestimate the difficult journey that lies ahead. In Ireland, we know this from our own experience of overcoming conflict. As former President Mary Robinson said yesterday, the arc of peace is long. And while each conflict is different, Ireland stands ready to share our relevant experience from our peace process. Ireland recognised the State of Palestine last year. We did that because we believe in the equal right to self-determination, to peace, to security, and to dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians alike. We welcome the announcement by France that it will recognise Palestine, and we acknowledge the statement we've just received from the United Kingdom. We encourage other countries to recognise Palestine. We encourage those who have not done so to recognise the State of Israel. The outcome of this high-level conference must be a clear signal to the Palestinian people that we support their right to self-determination, and that we support the choice of the Palestinian leadership to achieve this through a peaceful political pathway. We welcome the commitments made by President Abbas in this regard. I reaffirm Ireland's support for the Palestinian Authority and its reform agenda. I call on Israel to release the revenues owed to the Palestinian Authority that it is withholding, revenues collected in tax that are necessary to fund vital services and to pay the salaries of workers in Palestine. This conference must be a turning point where we, the international community, mobilises at political, at economic, at financial and at security levels to set in motion the path of a two-state solution. I reiterate Ireland's unwavering support for the indispensable role of UNRWA in support of Palestinian refugees. This is vitally important right now in delivering life-saving aid in Gaza, and we must protect and we must preserve the vital mandate of UNRWA. The International Court of Justice, in its advisory opinion, has stated that the continuing Israeli presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is illegal under international law, and that settlements are also illegal. Numerous Security Council resolutions have reaffirmed that settlements are illegal. And yet in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, we are seeing record levels of settlement construction, large-scale displacement of the Palestinian population and unprecedented levels of violence. In Gaza, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has concluded that the manner in which parties to the conflict have conducted hostilities, especially Israel's choice of methods and means of warfare, has involved unprecedented disregard for international human law. Accountability for grave breaches of international law by any party has to be our focus. There must be accountability. There must be accountability for unilateral actions that undermine the viability of the two-state solution. The international community must bring an end to the devastating cycles of violence. We must make good on our commitment to implement once and for all the two-state solution. The outcome document will chart a path forward to secure peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. And now we must seize this opportunity before it is too late. Thank you.
Je remercie
I thank
la ministre d'État,
the Minister of State,
au ministère des Dépenses publiques, de l'infrastructure, de la réforme du service public et de la transition numérique de l'Irlande. Et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence Madame Maria Tripodi, sous-secrétaire d'État aux Affaires étrangères et à la coopération internationale de l'Italie.
Thank you, Mr. President of the General Assembly, dear delegates, excellencies. The continuation of military operations, the grave humanitarian conditions in Gaza, and the stalemate in negotiations continue to severely test regional stability. Reaching a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and the resumption of adequate humanitarian assistance are urgent priorities, a prerequisite for any development of a peace process in the Middle East. With this conference, we testify the importance of working toward the day after based on the two-state two-state solution, which fulfills the aspirations and needs of both Israelis and Palestinians, and can bring stability to the entire region, ending the cycle of violence that has plagued the Middle East for decades. Stability that must represent one of the main objectives of our action as an international community, because it opens up prospects for development and integration at all levels, economic, social, and cultural, that ensue for the region. It is essential to continue to work toward the realization of the two-state solution, and as it is equally essential to safeguard its foundations, to help promote a just and lasting two-state solution. Italy has decided to participate actively, with commitment and determination, in the work of this conference, co-chairing together with Indonesia the working group on security.
Rispondere alle esigenze di sicurezza degli israeliani e dei palestinesi rimane al centro della prospettiva dei due Stati. Si tratta di un prerequisito per il progresso politico e di un elemento fondamentale per la sostenibilità di qualsiasi soluzione di lungo periodo. Anche in tale ottica l'Italia è a favore di una missione di stabilizzazione a Gaza e di monitoraggio in Cisgiordania. La protezione internazionale dell'ONU renderebbe percorribile la via di uno Stato palestinese non militarizzato. Su questo l'Italia ha apprezzato l'apertura e l'impegno dell'autorità palestinese a trovare una soluzione accettabile anche per Israele. Il nostro approccio è stato quello di garantire l'inclusione e l'equilibrio, tenendo presente le prospettive e le esigenze di sicurezza di entrambe le parti. L'Italia è pronta a fare e a dare il proprio contributo per accompagnare Israele e il futuro Stato palestinese in questo percorso. Proprio da una Gaza libera da Hamas e riunificata con la Cisgiordania, sotto un'autorità palestinese rafforzata e riformata, potrà prendere avvio un futuro di pace e prosperità per la regione. L'azione italiana è basata proprio su queste premesse. Dall'inizio del conflitto
Since the start of the conflict, Italy has mobilized 110 million euros for the Gaza crisis and the development in the West Bank. Within the Food for Gaza initiative, which counts on the support of both Israelis and Palestinians, we have worked to deliver humanitarian aid to the civilian population.
Eccellenze, distinti delegati, vorrei ricordare anche in questa autorevolissima sede l'impegno italiano nel settore medico, grazie al quale siamo riusciti a portare in Italia 150 bimbi bisognosi di cure e i rispettivi accompagnatori. La scorsa settimana l'Italia ha aderito con profonda convinzione, con altri 30 partner, alla dichiarazione congiunta su Gaza e i territori palestinesi occupati, nella quale viene ribadita la condanna delle restrizioni al flusso degli aiuti umanitari. Nella dichiarazione si sottolinea anche l'importanza di evitare azioni in grado di compromettere la soluzione a due Stati, con particolare riguardo alla Cisgiordania, che ne costituisce una premessa essenziale.
In Cisgiordania i nostri carabinieri sono presenti da decenni per la formazione delle forze di polizia dell'autorità palestinese, il cui consolidamento istituzionale riteniamo essere fondamentale. Il sostegno che diamo all'autorità palestinese passa anche attraverso la nostra partecipazione ai processi dell'Unione Europea, che ha approvato un programma di 1,6 miliardi di euro per aiutare e sostenere l'autorità palestinese nella fornitura di servizi alla popolazione, oltre che per facilitare la ripresa economica della striscia di Gaza e della Cisgiordania e sostenere il settore privato. In conclusione, i lavori di questa conferenza ci ricordano che la realizzazione della soluzione a due stati richiede uno sforzo articolato che deve puntare a costruire la fiducia reciproca tra entrambe le parti, una fiducia che costituisce, a nostro avviso, l'unica reale garanzia per una pace giusta, duratura e stabile. Vi ringrazio.
Thank you.
Je remercie la sous-secrétaire d'État aux Affaires étrangères et à la coopération internationale de l'Italie. Je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Florian Hahn, ministre adjoint au ministère fédéral des Affaires étrangères de l'Allemagne.
Co-chairs, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking France and Saudi Arabia for convening this important conference. Our convening today takes place against the backdrop of the ongoing war in Gaza, raging for more than 20 months now. Nothing can be stronger, more pressing reminder of the need to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to take action towards peace and the two-state solution. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains utterly unacceptable. Hostages, including 7 German citizens, are still in Hamas's captivity. The man-made hunger crisis afflicting civilians in Gaza is especially unsettling. All these will have irreversible consequences for generations. Germany, therefore, demands immediate, safe, rapid, unhindered, and sustained access by the UN and humanitarian organizations, an immediate ceasefire, and the unconditional release of hostages now. More than 600 trucks are waiting in Al-Arish at the Egyptian border alone, and Germany committed up to $350 million in humanitarian assistance since October 2023 to operations in the Palestinian territories. Ladies and gentlemen, Germany will always be unbreakably committed towards security of the State of Israel and its people. And it is our firm conviction that ultimately only the two-state solution with a Palestinian state existing side by side in peace and security will guarantee Israel's existence as a Jewish and democratic state. Or to put it in other words, all people in the region have to be able to live without fear and in dignity. After the horrendous terrorist attack of Hamas on the 7th October and the brutal war that followed since 20 months, one thing is clear. Managing the conflict is not longer an option. We finally need to solve it. The suffering of people has to end. We therefore appreciate that discussions on the day after in Gaza are a key part on this conference. As Germany, we suggest the following. First, Hamas must neither govern Gaza nor be a threat to Israel. For this reason, we stand ready to help providing security by concrete measures, including through EU missions such as UBAM, Rafah, and UPOL COPS, and support to the United States Security Coordinator for Israel and Palestinian Authority. We do this in cash and in kind. Second, we welcome the Arab plan for the day after. Any day after plan needs local Palestinian and Arab ownership. Gaza belongs to the Palestinians and must be rebuilt. Third, we state loud and clear that the Palestinian Authority, as sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people, must play the key role in the future governance arrangement. For this reason, let me confirm that Germany stands ready to play an important role in the reconstruction of Gaza and supports the international efforts of Egypt and other partners. We are considering to co-convene a reconstruction conference soon after the ceasefire is achieved. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our clear policy to protect the viability of the two-state solution. We push back against any attempt to weaken or destroy it, be it on the ground or in the political sphere. For this reason, three legal arguments in line with long-standing EU positions are key to our policy. First, we do not and will not recognize any changes to the 1967 borders unless agreed upon by the parties. Second, we consider Israeli settlements in the occupied territories unlawful and a serious obstacle to peace. Third, we respect the ICJ's advisory opinion of the 19th July 2024 and act in line with its stipulations. Ultimately, we want to see an independent, democratic, and viable Palestinian state existing side by side in peace and security with Israel. Two remarks. This state needs to be built, not just declared. The building of this state has to be made possible, not impossible. For this reason, we contribute every single day in cash and in kind to building the foundations of the future Palestinian state. First, the total value of our ongoing bilateral development cooperation with the Palestinian Authority amounts to more than $1 billion in total. We work for better institutions, efficient Palestinian municipalities, and improved water services and infrastructure. Second, we strengthen the Palestinian economy through education, vocational training, and the work programs, and we call on Israel to release this tax revenue which belong to the Palestinian Authority under the provisions of the Paris Protocol. Third, we support civil society, peace building, dialogue, and shared society initiatives that pave the way for a better understanding of both societies. Joint narratives for peace are more important than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, even if it seems like a very remote perspective, while there is a war in Gaza and while there are very negative trends in the West Bank, a two-state solution must be negotiated by Israel and the Palestinians. As Germany, we have said to recognize a Palestinian state rather at the end of such negotiations. This is still our position, but we do see that Israeli policies are currently pointing in the opposite direction. This is utterly wrong and not serving Israel's long-term security interests. We therefore urge Israel to engage in the political process for a two-state solution, which is launched with the conference today. This is a way to achieve lasting peace and lasting security. Thank you very much.
أشكر وزير الدولة في وزارة الخارجية الاتحادية لألمانيا. والآن أعطي الكلمة إلى سعادة سيدة مينا نائبة وزير خارجية إستونيا.
Co-chairs and colleagues, let me add Estonia's voice to some very important statements already made during this conference. So as we are living in a world increasingly shaped by conflict, the international rules-based order with the UN Charter at its core is under a growing strain. One of the clearest and most painful examples in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine, it stands as a symbol of our collective failure. Failure to prevent suffering, to mediate peace, to uphold international law, and to protect the innocent. We must ask ourselves, how can we, in the 21st century, allow this conflict to continue threatening both people? How many more generations must grow up amid rockets and rubble before we say, enough? There are no words enough to describe the devastation caused by escalation of violence since 7 October 2023. We must continue to strongly demand the protection of civilians, the release of hostages, distribution of life-saving aid at scale, and accountability for violations of international law. Estonia has consistently worked towards these aims and provided humanitarian assistance through international humanitarian organizations. Ending the devastation in Gaza is not only a political imperative, it is a moral one. To truly end the cycle of violence, we must address its underlying causes. The only comprehensive path forward is the two-state solution, a viable independent Palestine and a secure and recognized Israel. Two peoples living side by side in peace, dignity, and security. This path requires meaningful engagement, courage, and leadership from both Israelis and Palestinians. We need to insist on benefits of dialogue, empower responsible voices, and support those who still believe that peace is possible. It also requires a committed international community. We need honest brokers who are guided by justice and long-term vision. We commend those countries and leaders who have undertaken that task and put in their effort throughout the years. We agree that it is high time to move beyond ideals towards practical implementation of the two-state solution. To this end, Estonia welcomes and supported the convening of this conference and is an active member of the Global Alliance for the Implementation of the Two-State Solution. There have been many valuable ideas on how to accelerate the implementation of the two-state solution, and we are ready to do our part. It has to start today. In order to materialize an independent Palestinian state, we need to strengthen the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian institutions. Estonia is a long-standing supporter of the Palestinian Authority. We have had cooperation in e-governance, helping to build digital services. We have advised Palestinian police through the EU mission and trained Palestinian diplomats at the Estonian Diplomatic School. We will continue to support the Palestinian Authority and its reform agenda. Estonia is also committed donor and partner to UNRWA and will contribute to discussions on the agency's future. The road ahead is difficult, but the alternative, continued violence and despair, is unacceptable. Let us recommit ourselves to peace as a necessity. Let us work to end this war as an act of global responsibility. And let us help bring Israelis and Palestinians together, not just because they deserve peace, but because the world needs it too. Thank you.
Je remercie la vice-ministre des Affaires étrangères de l'Estonie et je donne maintenant la parole à son Excellence M. Herbert Scheibner, envoyé spécial de la République d'Autriche pour la conférence sur la solution des deux États.
Excellencies, distinguished co-chairs, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my appreciation to the co-chairs, France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for the convening of this very important high-level conference. Austria remains firmly committed to a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East, a peace in which two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace and security within secure and international recognized borders. But we are not here to merely reaffirm long-held positions. We are here to support concrete progress for real steps toward the implementation of the two-state solution. Sadly, the already distant prospects for a lasting peace have moved even further out of reach ever since the horrendous terror attack by Hamas on 7th of October. And we should never forget this. As a first and crucial step towards resuming a credible peace process, the war in Gaza must end right now. To this end, Austria calls for an immediate ceasefire in line with UN Security Council's resolutions 2735, leading to a permanent end of hostilities. Hamas must unconditionally release all remaining hostages with dignity. Taking them was a crime, a terroristic act that should never have been committed. At the same time, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is nothing less than apocalyptic. Too many civilians, too many children have lost their lives in vain. The suffering of the civilian population must stop. Abiding by international humanitarian law is not optional. In an effort to alleviate the dire crisis, Austria has provided over 67 million euro in humanitarian aid to Gaza and the conflict-ridden region since hostilities began. We welcome the understanding reached between the European Union and Israel to significantly improve the distribution of aid and call for its full and swift implementation. Moreover, the United Nations and the ICRC must be fully involved in the distribution of aid, a mechanism that does not comply with the humanitarian principles and puts vulnerable people at risk, defies its own purpose. The reported killing of over 1,000 Palestinians seeking aid is horrifying and unacceptable. Stabilizing both the security and humanitarian situations is a prerequisite for a second phase, the medium-term perspective. This second step is the reconstruction effort and economic support. For us, it's clear. Gaza is and will remain Palestinian. Any calls for displacement or annexation of Palestinian legal land are illegal and will not only lead to more chaos and violence in the region. But the most difficult question remains: how can a pragmatic and realistic governance arrangement be ensured for Gaza under the Palestinian Authority, in which Hamas plays no role and is fully disarmed, posing no threat to Israel? Austria welcomes the initiative of the Arab countries to present a plan for the reconstruction of Gaza. We will continue to support this plan and stand ready to contribute to its financing when the time comes for its implementation. Austria, also via the European Union, will continue to support the Palestinian Authority to help it address its most pressing needs, build international capacities, and implement its reform agenda. A strong Palestinian Authority is also in the interest of Israel. Therefore, we call on Israel to release the legitimate funds of the Palestinian Authority. Finally, on the long-term perspectives for a two-state solution. While this conference is of course an important contribution, a negotiated solution remains the only sustainable path that is in the interest of both parties. Austria therefore calls for the swift resumption of credible negotiations between the parties. Austria continues to support the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and the establishment of a democratic, viable, and continuous Palestinian state. In this regard, Austria will not recognize any changes to the 1967 borders unless agreed by the parties. Austria rejects any unilateral attempts to undermine the prospects for a two-state solution. The expansion of settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories is a clear violation of international law and an obstacle to peace. We demand that Israel holds all construction of additional settlements. The legitimate security concerns of Israel must represent a key consideration of any process leading to a two-state solution. All actors in the region must clearly reject any kind of terrorism. Excellencies, Austria's commitment to peace is unwavering. The international community has a clear role to play to enable, to support, and to hold all parties accountable. You ever can count on Austria to continue to stand always on the side of peace. Thank you very much.
أشكر المبعوث الخاص لجمهورية النمسا المؤتمر المعني لحل الدولتين والآن أعطي الكلمة إلى سعادة أرتشوس ديسيكس الأمين البرلماني في وزارة خارجية لاتفيا.
Distinguished participants, ministers, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking France and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for convening this meeting at a critically important time. As a newly elected member of the United Nations Security Council, we are humbled by the responsibility we now share in upholding international peace and security. We approach this role guided by our own history of striving for sovereignty, dignity, and international recognition. Our experience is at the foundation of our belief that we can work together and make the two-state solution a reality. We have been striving for peace in the Middle East for several decades, and the current crisis, triggered by the brutal terror attacks of Hamas against Israel, is a testament to the necessity for a political horizon that can guarantee the security of both Israel and the Palestinians. More than 1,000 civilians killed in Israel during and after 7th of October of 2023, and almost 60,000 victims in Gaza are proof that the status quo is not sustainable. It is vital not to permit Hamas terrorists and other radical groups to hijack the Palestinian cause. Therefore, Latvia joins the international community in calling for immediate release of all hostages without preconditions, immediate return to the ceasefire, and ensuring supplying humanitarian aid at scale. Unfortunately, humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to spiral. Reports about civilian killings in Gaza while attempting to receive humanitarian assistance are deeply worrying and require immediate and independent investigation. Therefore, all efforts to expand humanitarian access to Gaza must be implemented swiftly and fully. The current crisis cements Latvia's firm belief that the only path to sustainable peace is through upholding international law, including international humanitarian law and the principles of UN Charter, in the Middle East and in other ongoing wars around the globe. We can build upon the Peace Day effort, expanding its focus beyond the day after to formulate concrete steps that will lead to the lasting solution. Meanwhile, it is essential to provide political and practical support for the legitimate Palestinian authorities, which the European Union, including Latvia, has strived to do for many decades. This should bolster the standing of Palestinian representation in potential peace talks and prepare the way for democratic elections in Palestine that should result in a government that has a strong mandate for negotiations towards a lasting, peaceful settlement. And in this regard, we welcome the intention of President Abbas to hold elections for a new Palestinian National Council before the end of the year. Latvia believes that the two-state solution must not be only a slogan. It must be a common goal for both sides and also for international community. Two-state solution also means recognizing Israel's right to exist as a state, and it is also a name that leads to mutual recognition and practical guarantees for both sides, because the alternative is further cycles of more destructive violence and radicalization. So let me take the opportunity to welcome the current conference once again as a crucial step towards building a roadmap that leads to the realization of the two-state solution. This should lead to direct negotiations guided by international law and relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions, resulting in two states living side by side in peace and security. Thank you.
Je remercie le secrétaire parlementaire du ministère des Affaires étrangères de la Lettonie. Nous sommes maintenant arrivés au terme du temps qui nous est imparti pour cette séance du débat général. Le débat se poursuivra cet après-midi à 15h dans cette salle. La séance est levée.